The events of this story begin in the beautiful country of Achaea. This place is considered the birthplace of all wizards. Many years ago, in this country, there lived people with incredible mastery of magical powers. But one day, God deprived the inhabitants of Achaea of magic. The country became a piece for the invaders and quickly lost its power and influence in the political arena. The country has become weak without its powerful magic. The only hope for salvation was a marriage of convenience. Panting with excitement, a guy with blonde hair and amber eyes burst into the room. He couldn't believe his parents were doing this to his sister. This was Jenner Catathel, the second prince of the kingdom of Achaea. He was outraged that his parents could decide to marry so suddenly. There was confusion in his eyes. In response to his brother's indignation, the eldest heir, the first prince of the kingdom of Achaea, Dikvid Catathel, with composure and calmness, asked him to tone down. The younger brother still shouted with rage that this was complete absurdity and considered it madness to send his own sister to the bloody Rhodion Empire, straight into the hands of Kavanaugh. Jenner still could not calm down and began to tell her brother about what people were saying among themselves. It's like they're selling the princess to avoid war. The ruler of that state was very cruel. He could kill dozens of people for his bloody sport. The first princess of the kingdom of Achaea, Eusphir Catatel, was of unearthly beauty. She has long blonde hair, green eyes. Now her eyes, the color of leaves in a spring garden, showed acceptance of this situation. She quickly stopped her little brother's speech. Jenner looked at her with great hope that she would stay. And while the princess explained to him that it was her choice, she insisted on this to save her country. The princess asked her brother to be strong, take care of his father, and obey his elder brother, caring for the good of the state. The eldest heir thanked Eusphir, because she always defended the interests of the country. The girl realized that she was a princess. It was almost impossible to marry for love, and she had long ago accepted this fate. This marriage was supposed to save the kingdom from the threat of war and bloodshed from the empire, and our heroine believed that in this situation, she should have been happy about this outcome. The princess's head was already covered with a veil. Her silhouette seemed even smaller, and the dress emphasized all the beauty of the girl. She bowed her head before the altar. In her hands was a bouquet of delicate pink roses for marriage. The girl realized that she should be happy, but it didn't really work out for her. She slowly examined the silhouette of her betrothed. A sharp chin, broad shoulders. He looked majestic and courageous. The priest declared them husband and wife and ordered them to kiss the bride. There was sadness in the girl's eyes. The emperor gently drew his wife to him and ordered her to close her eyes and kissed her tenderly. The princess covered her lower lip with her hand, thinking about something. There was some kind of melancholy in the eyes. The emperor, with some excitement, asked if everything was fine with the girl. The girl had the realization that there was no turning back after sealing the marriage with a kiss. From now on, she was married. The emperor sat majestically on his horse, giving the order to line up and set off, raising his sword. The sun's rays pierced the thick crowns of trees, as if seeing off the girl. The rays of the setting sun played in the princess's hair. She sincerely did not understand why her husband caused a huge commotion. The luxurious carriage with cavalry set off on a long journey until the sun set below the horizon. The horses obediently walked along the path. Eusphir was very nervous. She could not know how good the emperor was, and how he treated his servants, subjects, and residents of the empire. The girl guessed that it was quite difficult for him to abandon his empire for such a long time. Princess Eusphir was very nervous, and for several minutes she thought about the veracity of the rumors because they were terrible. Rumor said that he was a tyrant, a monster, a murderer. According to the girl, the emperor looked majestic as if he was a god, and she seemed to be unearthly, like a small, homely, faded bird in a golden cage. Many years ago, the royal family of Catatel was imbued with the magic of the guardian deity of the Great Silver Forest. In every generation of the royal family, a wizard was born who defended the state. Eusphir, whose magic was weak, did not understand why she was so unlucky. Small particles like autumn leaves circled in the girl's palms. Doubts shrouded the girl's mind, because she had a great role ahead of her. With every second, the girl worked herself up more and more. She was afraid of annoying the emperor and what he would do with her. Among the dense forest, the girl noticed a silhouette in a black cloak. The rays of the sun enveloped the stranger, as if creating the illusion of a light glow. In the hands of the stranger was a clot of magical energy. It was quite big. The girl looked at this creature with great surprise and could not believe her eyes, because members of the royal family could wield magic only once in a generation. The princess looked at the surge of magic in numbness. Thoughts were confused in my head, and fragments of trees and dirt and a luminous arrow flew into the carriage. The forest calm was disturbed and torn apart by a loud sound. The horses began to rush along the forest path in fear. A few seconds later, the emperor realized that the carriage had just been attacked from the depths of the forest. The arrow hit the empress. The girl was clutching her bleeding wounds. There was fear in her eyes, and her wedding dress was rapidly becoming covered with scarlet liquid. A picture of memories flashed before the girl's eyes. It's as if she's still in the castle and the reflections of the room's cozy fireplace are playing on the walls. That day, she sat and talked with her older brother, because she did not want to marry for convenience and leave her kingdom. And at that moment, her eyes filled with fear, and tears flowed down her snow-white cheeks. She sincerely wanted to find another way out. There was hopelessness on his face. It was painful for the prince to see the girl's tears, but unfortunately he saw no other way out of this situation. The future of the country depended only on her, because the kingdom had no powerful army, no money, no territories, nothing except a powerful wizard once a generation. And there was no guardian who could protect their kingdom. There could be no other way out. There was sadness in the girl's beautiful green eyes. They slowly filled with tears. The empress lay on the floor of the carriage, blood flowing from her deep wounds, staining her snow-white dress with scarlet spots. The girl's strength was leaving her. Hot tears were about to flow from her glassy eyes. Yusufir began to blame herself for everything. The exhausted empress fell into the abyss from loss of blood. Yusufir heard her name and hardly opened her eyes. She woke up on a forest road. She was thrown into a cold sweat. The empress did not understand how this could happen, because she had just been hit by an arrow. Turning around, she saw Kvanak, who was holding her lifeless body in his arms and begging her to wake up. The emperor held Yusufir's lifeless body. The servants, trembling, wanted to say that she was already dead, but they were afraid because they knew that the master would be very angry. The emperor held the girl's body tightly and said that he shouldn't have trusted the government of the server kingdom of Archaea for a moment. His face was distorted with rage, and his eyes showed hatred and anger. He realized that he should not have believed in this happy marriage, and he declared this marriage dissolved. Then he decided to declare war on Archaea, shedding a sea of blood. The spirit of Yusufir could not believe that her sacrifice was in vain, and blood would be shed on her native land. The girl's spirit really wanted there to be no war. She wanted to tell him not to do this, but she was nothing more than the wind. The emperor ordered an immediate return to the empire. He threw Yusufir's body onto his horse and quickly rode away. The girl's soul felt terrible pain, as if her body was being torn into small pieces, but she could not overcome the moral pain that war would soon begin. The man approached the abandoned carriage and sarcastically pitied Yusufir, whose blood had not had time to dry and touch the pool of blood. The girl could not believe her eyes, because her brother was standing near the place of her death. The hope still did not fade in the girl's eyes that he had come to save her. But after the words of the hooded man that the plan had finally been completed, the whole world collapsed for her. The prince's hands were covered in sticky scarlet liquid, and a grin shone on his face. He was damn glad to finally get rid of her. He clearly did not expect Quana to take her body. The archer assured that he had hit the heart. The girl's soul was in complete bewilderment at what she heard. Prince Dikvid recalled that he gave the go-ahead to kill Yusufir because he was promised the power that would help overthrow Emperor Radion. The unknown man said with a grin that their agreement was valid, and soon the entire continent will be at Dikvid's fingertips. The archer was disappointed that the emperor took the princess's body. After all, she had magic, and her body could be useful. The prince did not regret the murder he committed one bit, while the girl could not understand why everything turned out this way. Some time after the events described, as that archer said, a bloody war began. Yusufir's soul could not leave the place where she was killed on that damned day. Blood daily flooded the lands of Archaeus. Mountains of corpses filled forests, fields, and cities. It was like hell on earth. The girl's soul could not find peace and watched this nightmare. She did not understand why the gods punished her. Her elder brother, under the pretext that the ruler of the empire, Radion, had killed Yusufir, united with the northern kingdom. Quite quickly, Archaea began to lose ground. Kavana courageously won over and over again, shedding seas of blood. Because of the war, Yusfir lost her meaning of existence. Every day she saw people die before her eyes, day after day. She blamed herself for not fulfilling her role and not being able to die properly. It was already the 3rd year of the bloody war. And finally, Dikvid appeared before the emperor and his army. Dikvid was forced to his knees, but he began to snap and blame Kvanok for everything. That he deprived him of everything that was dear. The emperor waved his sword and promised after his death to find the pathetic little soul of the prince and kill him again. Yusfir's soul watched as the sword tore his brother's head off his shoulders. Thick blood flooded the forest clearing, illuminated by moonlight. The emperor stood in the middle of a clearing, which was flooded with moonlight. On his face was the dried blood of his enemies. He stood with a bloody sword at the mountain of corpses and ordered Akia to be burned to the ground. The girl's soul was in complete despair. After all, the last person who was so close to her during her life was killed. She did not understand why her brother did this and killed her, the king, and Jenner. With tears in her eyes, she began to pray to the spirit of the Silver Forest to help her. She was ready to give her soul for the salvation of Akia. Her prayer was heard, and a clot of magic thickened, giving her a chance to change everything. Yusuf woke up in bed after a long sleep. Her father and younger brother were sitting next to her. They didn't understand why the girl was delusional. Surprise and joy were visible in the girl's eyes. Jenner hugged her tightly. She sat next to her younger brother on her soft bed. For a few seconds, the terrible picture of how they died during the war was revived before her eyes. The father stood and talked with the doctor, not fully understanding whether everything was okay with his daughter. While the girl was glad that everyone was alive, he stated that everything was fine. And if she is a true keeper, hair and eye color can change naturally. But his data is outdated, because more than 100 years have passed since the last awakening. Yusfir remembered that her magic awakened when she was 10 years old, which meant that she returned to the past. She still couldn't believe it. It seemed to her that she had gone crazy, or was simply hallucinating. The little brother whispered that she should not be sick and should always be with him. The girl hugged Jenner tightly and cried with happiness, realizing that the Lord of the Silver Forest had heard her prayers. Yusfir mentally promised to take advantage of the chance given by the goddess to fix everything, realizing that this time she simply had to protect herself, her native land and family. There was sincere happiness in the girl's eyes. Yusfir set herself the goal of becoming the most powerful guardian in history over these 10 years. The goddess Silver Forest was the younger sister of the goddess of peace, Fahar. According to legend, she was buried at the very edge of the world, where she was reborn in the form of a majestic silver forest. They said that it was near this forest that Archaea was founded. The goddess endowed her chosen ones with the title of guardian and recognition of the inhabitants. One day the magic suddenly disappeared, and along with the magic, the protection of the Lady of the Silver Forest. Archaea, having lost her blessing, was on the right path to the death of thousands of people. It was a miracle for everyone when magic awakened in Yusfir. Everyone has been waiting for this for many years. They rejoiced and praised the princess. The princess's magic was that she could talk with plants, but this magic seemed useless to people. The girl's hope was that her magic had not fully awakened. She stood next to a huge perennial oak tree, which said that her power had awakened. But he didn't even know what to tell the girl next. The plants turned out to be very kind, but this still could not calm the girl down because she was accused of having a weak style. The girl in her past life could only watch the fall of the kingdom, but now she felt that she could change everything. Yusfir was sure that if Mrs. Silver Forest sent her to the past and fulfilled another girl's wish, then everything should be different. She felt that she had been given special power. The girl sat over a flower pot and learned to use her magic again. She was amazed at how the magic made the plant grow quickly. Her eyes burned with delight and hope. The girls were unpleasantly surprised that the mistress did not fully understand her request. It was a little better than in the previous life. She was very disappointed. After all, even with such strength, she will not be able to resist Kvanna and his army. And this horror could happen again. Jakvid entered Yusfir's sunlit room. He said he was glad to hear that her powers had finally awakened. Remembering the insult and betrayal from her past life, she gave her brother a good slap in the face. The guy was very taken aback by his sister's actions. The girl apologized and explained that she was not feeling very well yet. She tried to make excuses that magic somehow affected her body, in the hope that Dakvid would believe it. The guy smiled and said that of course he understood everything, and realized how difficult it was for her now. He took her hands and wished her a quick recovery. After she found out Dakvid's real motives, now every word he said seemed insincere. He told the bad news that the people could not believe that the Silver Forest blessed their people, although the girl became a guardian. Dakvid thought it was terrible that the people did not believe that their princess had magic. The girl felt somehow uneasy. The brother said that he did not doubt her, but the people could understand. Even if the magic had awakened, this did not mean that the girl would be able to fully use it. The guy took her hand and said that she shouldn't place more hope on her. His smile looked somehow fake. He told his sister that people very much doubt that the princess actually has magic. For Yusfir, it was very strange. Because the events, actions, words of people, everything was the same as in a previous life. Memories from the last time came flooding back to the girl. How she happily rushed to tell her brother about her abilities. How she says that she just chatted with flowers in the royal garden, and they conveyed their memories to her. But the eldest heir only coldly devalued her abilities. Dakvid said that it was difficult to even call this an ability, and that she should think what people would say when they found out that she was only capable of this. At that moment, the princess's green eyes filled with tears. Dakvid reassured her, saying that he would always protect her, and ordered her not to tell anyone about her ability. People were discussing that she was not a guardian, and did not even know how to use her magic. They condemned her. Then it seemed to Yusfir that this was not a blessing, but a curse, and the eldest heir argued that she should not use magic. Her vision was interrupted when the memories reached the most painful part, how her brother treacherously killed her. The girl covered her face with her hands in the hope of driving away these monstrous memories from her head. The brother, with concern in his voice, asked what happened to her. She wanted to say something but didn't have time. Then she heard a strange voice in her head that she knew what would happen next and what she could do about it. An inner voice doubted both her abilities and the good intentions of her mistress. It was as if the mistress gave her the opportunity to go through all that hell again. The girl waved her hand sharply, trying to push away her doubts and at least try to save her kingdom this time. Dakvid looked at his sister, not understanding what was happening to her. Drops of cold sweat appeared on the girl's forehead, and her heart jumped out of her chest. The guy couldn't understand what was happening to his sister and again asked if she was okay. The girl, despite the internal pain and rapid breathing, answered that everything was fine with her. She wanted to meet with Lady Silverwood and talk, even if she had no intention of saving Yusfir, to understand what exactly the mistress needs from her. The Silver Forest was located at the very edge of the world. A carriage carrying a princess and 2 courtiers arrived in a snowy wasteland. Subjects trying to protect their faces from sharp gusts of wind with snow and ice crystals. They asked the girl to think carefully and come back. Yusfir made a decision for herself that until she knew her purpose, she could not return. It all started in the room where her sick father lay. He could not understand why the girl needed to go into the forest. Yusfir explained that her magic had awakened, and she considered this the right decision. Her father began to dissuade her. After all, according to tradition, only the king has the right to meet with his mistress. And then the chance to see the goddess comes only once in a lifetime. In most cases, the Silver Forest is very friendly to people, but she also has moments when she is like a snowstorm or an avalanche. One day, the king wasted his chance just to make a wish and resurrect the queen. But the lady then refused to help, because this was against the laws of her older sister Fahar. At that moment, the king was heartbroken over the loss of his beloved, and the cold breath of the Silver Forest took away the last of my strength. Her father dissuaded her from the trip because it was quite dangerous. Yusfir insisted on her position and promised to return immediately if something did not go according to plan. The princess sincerely hoped that the meeting with her mistress would help her understand what to do next. It was not in vain that the Silver Forest bestowed her blessing. Yusfir sincerely wanted to understand what she could do to preserve the happy future of her kingdom. The king looked thoughtfully at his daughter and suggested that the goddess could really accept Yusfir. He put his hand in his bosom and took out a pendant with a bright red stone and handed it to Yusfir. There was sincere surprise and delight in the girl's eyes. My father ordered me to take the pendant with me and explained that it was an artifact that gave warmth. He bought it for Yusfir's mother many years ago. The king hoped that he would help his daughter too. The girl stood in the middle of a snowy forest and was amazed at the power of the artifact. After all, thanks to him, the body temperature did not decrease, despite the severe frost. The girl squeezed him tightly in her hands and remembered her parents. She promised herself never to lose loved ones again. For the sake of her family, she was ready to change her destiny. After all, she had already lost everyone who was dear to her. A strong wind blew the princess's hair, but she didn't care. After all, now it was the only way out. The subjects did not understand what she was doing. The girl touched the ground. She knew that she still had powers from her previous life. She mentally spoke to the plants of this forest, begging for an answer. There was surprise and a little fear on the faces of her guards. She asked the plants to help her meet with Lady Silver Forest. The girl asked the lady to let her in. Small snowflakes fluttered in the blue sky. The girl was sure that the snowstorm was her sign for permission to enter. She ordered those accompanying her to wait for her in the same place. The further the girl walked, the colder it became. She tightly clutched the artifact in her hand and walked towards the mistress. Her skin felt like it was freezing. Eusphere heard the mistress calling her name and turned around, and she appeared before the girl's eyes in the form of a majestic perennial tree. The lady kindly asked the girl what brought her to her in this life. The girl realized that she was right and returned to the past. Eusphere asked for what purpose the lady brought her back to the past, and she asked for a little more strength to protect Akia. Silver Forest said that she had been watching her for a long time, but I still didn't fully understand the princess's motives. The lady reminded that she could fulfill only one wish by making Eusphere the queen of Akia. The girl stood in front of the mistress and said that she heard the voice of the Silver Forest and thought that the goddess wanted to entrust her with an important role. The lady ordered to return to the palace because Eusphere's still fragile body could freeze. The artifact could soon stop working. The girl stood with her arms wide open. After all, she didn't care about herself. Eusphere was ready to die. She believed that it was better to die than to watch a bloody war. The girl was on her knees, begging her lady to give her at least a little more strength to protect her people. She couldn't sit within the walls of the palace and just watch all this. Silver Forest explained that she had virtually no magic left to give to the guardians. The lady apologized because she felt partly guilty for how difficult her past life had been. Therefore, the goddess will share a piece of her power with the girl. Silver Forest said that she believes that Eusphere can change the future of Akia. Pieces of magic were approaching the princess's chest. Doubts of the past enveloped the girl, and for a few moments it seemed to her that she could not change anything. And she will suffer through this life and eventually die such a lousy death. Eusphere cast a shadow of doubt. She didn't care whether she died or not, because now she at least had a chance to change something significantly. Now in the girl's fragile hands there was quite strong magic. Strong shoots broke through the permafrost and soared into the skies. 10 years have passed since that trip to the mistress. 20-year-old Eusphere had the mercy of Fakhar. The border guards politely bowed to the girl, taking a break from their litter. The guy thanked the princess for strengthening the borders, because there were much fewer casualties. The girl, using magic, erected many thorny vines, wrapping the barricades of her kingdom. She was happy to help her subordinates. The girl improved her magic and learned to make strong shields and other weapons. This made life a little easier for the military. The border guard smiled and said that sometimes it seems to him that they went through the war together. For a few seconds, pain appeared in the girl's eyes. She remembered watching the Achaeans die and being unable to do anything. The princess smiled and said that he was very insightful. The shocked guy tried to understand what the princess meant. Eusphere has been reading a lot since her rebirth, sometimes staying up late into the night in the library. I often refuse the nanny's offer to go to bed. Thanks to her meeting with Mrs. Eusphere, she received extraordinary power, which allows her to grow plants in a few moments. Thanks to books, she realized that it was necessary to build impenetrable forests and tried to learn how to make arrows using magic. Despite the fatigue, Eusphere understood that she should not stop for a second. After all, Kavana was rapidly expanding the borders of his bloody empire. She understood that the emperor would soon reach Akia. She was sad to realize that no matter how much she strengthened the military and borders, she was not able to resist the Radion Akia Empire. The princess understood that Akia should not drown in blood again. She is even ready to marry him again. The courtier ran up to her in a cold sweat and told her the terrible news. It turned out that a letter had arrived from Quanak, where the emperor said that he would not touch the kingdom if they gave him the princess. After this news was reported, the eldest heir was furious, and the princess was thinking about the fact that in a past life they agreed without hesitation. A letter from the emperor arrived with the same text as last time. The girl was surprised at what emotions her brother had then and now. The girl thought that Kavana might not have been like that in the first place, that perhaps he went through pain and uniqueness and became cold-blooded. Although this did not play any role now, looking up from her thoughts, the girl heard the noble speeches pouring from her brother's lips. Jakvid with a smile tried to explain everything to Yusfir, that he did not want to give the guardian into the hands of this bloodthirsty man. The princess said that she herself would like to marry Kwana, although there was a shadow of doubt in her eyes. A week has passed since the letter arrived. At this time, preparations for the wedding were in full swing. Everyone congratulated the girl on her upcoming wedding. Yusfir was sitting at the table and drinking tea. The calm was interrupted by Dakvid's footsteps. She coldly asked what brought him. The prince invited his sister to have a final heart-to-heart talk with him. Yusfir did not believe this hypocrisy and asked to speak closer to the point. The prince put a pendant with a sea-green stone. The girl didn't understand why she needed this necklace, but surprisingly, Yusfir answered that she should read more. Before the princess lay a communication artifact that would allow her to communicate with him at any time, in any corner of the world. She timidly took it in her hands. Dakvid asked to keep this artifact with her while she was in the Empire, and until she finds out all the weaknesses of Kvanag. In the girl's eyes, one could read misunderstanding and fear for the future of her kingdom. With burning eyes, Dakvid said that this was just a cover and the Radion Empire would soon collapse. Horror was visible in the princess's eyes, because if Kavana finds out about this, then war will begin. Dakvid said without the slightest regret that he had been preparing for war for a long time. Her brother told her the plan for unification and the war itself. He was damn sure that he could easily defeat Kvanag. Yusfir quickly realized that he had a strong wizard on his side, who helped him get this artifact. The girl could not believe that he was again, without a doubt, ready to start a war. Dakvid was outraged that she did not respond to his proposals. The princess came to the realization that if she dared to reject her brother's offer, she would again see those traces of blood. A feeling of hopelessness washed over the princess. It seemed to her that she could not change anything. She couldn't believe that the entire path she had traveled was in vain, and the future could not be changed. David said that their marriage will not solve all problems. He handed the girl classified documents. With a malicious smile, he informed the girl that the guardians cannot have children. Becoming a guardian meant that she had to dedicate herself entirely to the Lady of the Silver Forest. Yusfir learned that she would not be able to use magic outside of Akia. The girl couldn't believe that it was all true. The prince said that she had lost the opportunity to be a mother since her mistress chose her. Jakvid said that he found it in the back of the secret library. He sarcastically continued to insist that Kwana would be furious if she did not give birth to heirs. The prince continued to escalate the situation that when the emperor finds out about this, he will take revenge on Akia. At that same moment, the girl swung at the prince and asked him not to lie, to which he recalled that not a single textbook contained any mention of the children of the guardians. Yusfir's eyes showed fear and paranoia that she would not be able to prevent the war. At this time, the girl could not accept this fate. The man was washing himself off road dust, sweat, and blood. His escort suggested that as soon as they crossed the border, they might be attacked. And he talked about thieves, mercenaries, murderers, saboteurs. The water slowly flowed down the emperor's sculptured body. Many scars were visible on his chest, and the sun played with the drops of water. Kwana straightened his luxurious hair, the color of a raven feather. He said that he wanted to appear before the princess in a dignified manner. Events take us to Akia. The maid carefully covered Yusfir's fragile shoulders. It was cool outside and a strong gusty wind was blowing, so the girl could catch a cold. The girl's face was quite pale. There was doubt in her eyes. She understands that all this was in vain. After Dakvid left, the girl spent the whole night in the library. She realized that her brother's words were true. Not a single book mentioned the children of the guardians. Yusfir was sure until this moment that Kavana wanted an heir with magic, but only the mistress can bestow magic. The princess did not know what to do. After all, the emperor will need an heir. Drops of cold sweat appeared on her forehead. Lost in her dark thoughts, she did not even notice that the emperor had already arrived for the marriage. Yusfir watched as the emperor's horse walked slowly along the sidewalk. The order was given to open the palace gates. The princess sat in the castle, trying to come up with a plan to avoid the dissolution of her marriage. This would be unacceptable, because Yusfir wanted to save Akia at any cost. She reflected that she had almost been able to prevent her death at the hands of Dakwid. After all, now he believes that she can benefit him. No matter what, she will strive to show the Emperor that she is a good person. After all, her secret will be revealed sooner or later. The Emperor entered the room and addressed her. The girl stood up from her chair and greeted the Emperor with a bow. Kwana gently tucked her hair behind the girl's ear, which only caused misunderstanding in her. He noticed the bewilderment on the girl's face, and openly said that it seemed to him that she was not at all happy with their union. Yusfir began to awkwardly make excuses and say that she was incredibly happy about their union. But the Emperor quickly recognized the lie in her words. In response to the girl's attempts to justify herself, the Emperor asked not to call him Imperial Majesty. The princess did not understand why Kwana was against her calling him by his title. After all, he himself initially addressed her that way. In her past life, the girl did not pay attention to how Kwana treated her, and she realized that then she had not even seen him before the wedding. The Emperor suggested calling each other by name. He looked into her emerald-colored eyes, and he said her name. After this, the girl became very pleased that he began to address her by name. The Emperor interrupted her thoughts. He was surprised that the girl did not know his name. Yusfir awkwardly began to babble and apologize, after which she sincerely apologized and tenderly said his name, looking into his amethyst eyes. The girl stood at the mirror looking at her wedding dress. Cecilia cried at how beautiful the princess was in this attire. The maid was touched by Yusfir's nobility. For the princess, the dress seemed quite unusual. It seemed to the girl that being in the Radiant Empire, she would take risks every day. But she couldn't step back. It seemed to the princess that this marriage was only so that she would give birth to Kwanaha heirs with the ability to magic. Walking under the altar, the girl thought about how to hide her infertility. After all, she will not be able to give the Emperor an heir, even though she and Kwana didn't look like a couple. The princess also understood that this marriage was only a way to achieve peace. Only in this life did the girl notice that the Emperor was divinely handsome. An awkward kiss sealed their union. The newly made wife asked the man to wait. The girl's cheeks turned red. She tried to overcome her worries, convincing herself that everything would be okay. It was strange that even the banquet was cancelled. It seemed to Yusfir that they were leaving even earlier than in their previous life. The girl decided to try to use the communication artifact. The brother praised Yusuf for the right decision. The Emperor noticed that the girl's face was rather pale and thoughtful. Kwana asked what was happening to her. There were still doubts and fear in the girl's soul. She was infertile and it would be revealed in a couple of years. Yusuf didn't know how to stop Dakwid's plans. These thoughts made the girl feel even worse. Noticing that Yusfir's face had become as pale as snow, the Emperor said that he would ride in a carriage with his wife. He apologized, because it was against the traditions of the people of the north. The Emperor was quite worried about the girl's condition. He got down on one knee and said that he would help Yusfir get into the carriage. Taking care of the Empress, Kwana suggested that she hurry up, because they had a long journey ahead of them. He joked that his subjects would be very surprised when they saw him on his knees. Yusuf was surprised, because this did not happen in her previous life. Kavana helped the weakened girl into the carriage, using his palm instead of a step. She noticed that she began to experience quite warm feelings for her husband. She didn't know if this was a positive sign. Again, she drove along the same forest road. The sun was breaking through the treetops, leaning closer to sunset. The Emperor noticed that the girl was worried about something, but in his style he began to conduct the dialogue coldly. He was wondering if Yusfir was thinking about escaping, or if something was just hurting her. The Empress explained that she did not intend to escape, because from now on and forever she is his legal wife. The girl casually mentioned that it was her duty. Kavana noticed that at the wedding the girl kissed him somehow wrong, and asked her whether the princess liked him. Or part of her duty is to kiss a person who is disgusting to her. It seemed to the girl that Kwana thought that she hated him. The Emperor asked what kind of person she considers him to be. Yusfira said that from what she heard about him, it seems to her that he is a hero, that she had heard a lot not only about his noble origins, but also about his great deeds. The Emperor noticed the quickly flashing fear in the girl's eyes, and she had thoughts that she was already dead within 5 minutes. The girl continued to try to explain everything to him. After all, it seemed to her that the Emperor had decided to dissolve the marriage. He asked her not to tell him memorized words, but to say exactly what she thought, not as the Princess of Achaea, but as Yusfir as a person. The girl jumped up and began to explain her position. The emperor asked the girl to sit down, because it was not safe to ride standing. Something greatly frightened the horse. The carriage jerked sharply and Yusfir was unable to maintain her balance. The girl was already grouped and ready to fall. The emperor, thanks to his lightning-fast abilities, quickly caught her and pressed her tightly to his chest. Kavana asked if the girl had hurt herself. There was excitement in his voice and Yusfir began to understand that he was not so bad after all. The subordinates explained that a tree fell on the road and because of this, the horse got scared. Yusfir felt the magic slowly leaving her since they left the borders of Achaea. She hoped so much that Dakvid was lying to her. The girl felt the pain she experienced in a past life when an arrow pierced her heart. Yusfir had a suspicion that her brother had done this and would soon kill her. Without magic, Yusfir felt helpless. The Empress had a feeling that the fall of this tree was staged. The Emperor called out to the girl and still did not let go of her embrace, gently stroking her hair. He asked her to breathe deeply and reassured her that everything was fine. Kwana promised that no one would harm her. They were already near the lighthouse when Kwana asked for forgiveness for his harshness and rudeness. He understood that Yusfir would not really like the idea of a spontaneous wedding, and he wanted her to be sincere. Therefore, he promised her, no matter what happened, not to dissolve the marriage and the peace treaty. With an awkward smile, the emperor asked if she was at least a little less afraid. At that moment, the girl realized what kind of feelings she was experiencing. Yusfir said that she read a lot about him, and that his exploits and achievements were not a lie. She really read a lot about Kavanak Radionsky, in order to learn as much as possible about him and know what to watch out for. The more she learned about him, how he freed the people from the tyranny of the former emperor. In her eyes, unlike his previous life, Kwana was really not a bad person for her. Yusfir thanked Kavanak for helping her. Seeing the surprise on the emperor's face, the girl reminded him that they had agreed to call each other by name. They arrived at the port. The girl looked out the window and saw the endless sea. She was incredibly happy that the future had changed. The girl realized that she could finally sort out her feelings and not worry about the start of the war. In the castle of Manhwa-Radionsky, the Duke was interested in where the emperor was now. For the past month, Kwana has been serenading Yusfir with his future wife. The Duke was amazed at how quickly Kavana left Achaea after the wedding. The servant reported that the emperor had just passed through the forest and it was time to meet the new empress. When Yusfir got out of the carriage, she was amazed at how huge the ships were. Kavana explained to her that it was impossible to reach the empire on an ordinary ship. Kavana asked the chosen one to be careful because it was already dark, to which the girl replied that she could see everything perfectly. Her heel hit a small pothole in the road and she began to fall. The emperor, thanks to his lightning-fast reflexes, again helped the girl stay on her feet. The emperor was very worried about Yusfir's condition because she could have a broken bone. He took her hand and said that now they will go like this. The girl was surprised that her husband considered her so fragile. People close to the emperor were already waiting for the emperor to introduce his future wife. Austin immediately greeted His Majesty. After a stern look, Austin apologized for not introducing himself right away. It was Baron Austin Bielnar. Austin was born into a poor family. He was able to get out of poverty thanks to his skills and instincts. Austin did not pay attention to status and could see the true essence of a person. Kavanaugh noticed him when he was an ordinary military man. He was the emperor's strategist and advisor during the revolution, and now he was one of the most influential people in the country. When Yusfir was looking for information about Kavanak, the name of this baron was mentioned everywhere. The baron asked Yusfir if he could help her with anything, to which the girl refused his help. Kavana introduced the baron as a person from his inner circle. Kwana advised his wife to maintain good relations with the Duke. The girl introduced herself as Yusfir Katatel, but quickly realizing that she got married today, she said that from now on, she is Radionskaya. The Duke reminded them that it was time for them to go to the ship. The emperor ordered Yusfir to hold on to him, although the girl, because of her modesty, assured that she could handle it herself. The servants were surprised that they addressed each other by name, while the empress became shy, lowering her eyes to the floor. Kwana asked her what was the problem with this event. Austin reminded that this was not proper etiquette. The emperor reminded him that the Duke himself addressed him by name. The emperor calmly hinted to Austin that he should shut up. The Duke began to make excuses that he only did this at personal meetings. Kwana threatened Austin that he would fly into the water. This made Yusfir somehow feel uneasy. From the moment the girl tripped and slightly injured her leg, the emperor instantly turned his attention to her and was very caring. The girl, in order to stop the quarrel, said that she was dizzy. The emperor felt a little guilty that he was distracted by his communication with Austin. A moment later, the emperor was carrying the girl in his arms. Yusfir was embarrassed and asked to be lowered to the ground. Austin felt that the emperor should not have gone so far in front of his servants. Kavana brought the girl, tired from the road, to a bed in the middle of a huge, luxurious room, and he ordered not to hesitate to contact him if Yusfir needed anything else. The husband began asking how she was feeling and whether she had a fever. The girl's cheeks turned red from embarrassment. The empress noticed a luxurious dress on the bed and did not understand where it came from. He asked if she liked the outfit. Smiling, the empress noted that this was her favorite color. She had the feeling that her husband wanted to notice her magical powers with small sprouts on the hem of her dress. The girl was surprised, because it was the first time she had been given such a beautiful dress. She said that she would like to thank the person who gave her this wonderful gift. Kwana said that this gift was from him and it was just a house dress. The guy promised to return as soon as he dealt with urgent matters. He said not to wait for him and go to bed to rest, because it was already late. Yusfir, a little surprised, asked if he would really return to this room. The emperor reminded that they were now spouses. The girl felt a little awkward. From now on, she and Kwana will live in the same room as spouses, and here they will spend their first wedding night. Yusfir realized that sooner or later this would come, but she hoped that this would happen at least when they arrived in the empire. After passion on the wedding night, the girl didn't understand why he was in such a hurry. Yusfir was worried that Kvanak didn't like her at all. Our heroine understood that the sooner the wedding night passed, the sooner it would become clear that she was infertile. The man gently lifted her face and kissed the girl tenderly. As if sensing her excitement, he said that if they stay in the same room, this does not mean that there will be something between them. The emperor said that they were now spouses, and it would be somehow strange to live in different rooms. He promised that he would not lay a finger on the girl. Kwana noted that this was not the most suitable place for a wedding night, and he was not going to sleep with her until the girl wanted him. There was nobility in his words. The girl could not understand why, because she was sure that Kvanak only needed an heir with magic. The emperor was surprised that Yusfir was worried about this from the first day. He told her that they had nowhere to rush. The emperor asked the girl to at least pretend that she loved him. Kavana hoped that this fictitious marriage would one day develop into love. The ship set sail into the dark blue sea. Yusfir thought all night about why the emperor was so calm. The emperor convinced himself to leave the past in the past and never remember again. Austin burst into Kwana's chambers. He was not happy that he was only now learning that according to the treaty, they were supposed to help Achaea strengthen its borders. The emperor explained that they had taken the guardian from Achaea, and this was a rather strong blow to the defense of the borders. The duke began to snap at this because they could conquer Achaea in a few days. And why send experienced people there? For Kvanak, these were mere trifles compared to what he was ready to give for Yusfir. After all, this girl was not just a princess. The duke reacted quite sharply to this and only twirled his finger at his temple. The emperor asked him not to be cowardly. Moonlight was visible through the window. The girl felt terrible and quickly realized that it was due to the loss of magic. Yusfir realized that the emperor would understand that she had lost her power. She decided to ask the maid for some medicine. Even getting out of bed was not easy for her. The girl approached Kvanak and asked for medicine. Her husband quickly noticed her pale face. In response to his worries, the girl replied that she was just dizzy. But Kvanak insisted that a doctor should be called. She felt terribly nauseous, although she had not eaten anything for the last few days. The girl covered her mouth with her hand. When the emperor pressed her to him, the girl vomited right on his snow-white shirt. Kwana calmly looked at his shirt, and then at the empress and said that she definitely needed a doctor. The girl began to tremble, and everything swam before her eyes. She was afraid that now he would definitely end the marriage. After all, from the very beginning she looked very painful, and now this too. It seemed to Yusfir that she had completely ruined everything. Despite feeling terrible, she felt guilty and promised to take responsibility. The emperor, pretending that nothing had happened, simply took off his soiled clothes, exposing his torso. He asked Yusfir if everything was okay with her now. Kvanak convinced her that in this situation there was not the slightest fault of Yusufir. She was quite worried that she had ruined her husband's mood. The man assured his wife that it would be stupid to be angry with her because of seasickness. Yusufir did not understand what kind of seasickness we were talking about. The emperor convinced her this happens often. He apologized to her for not being attentive enough. The man suggested just forgetting about this incident. He quickly switched the topic to his youth and how he dealt with one infuriating guy near the battlefield. He pursued Kvanak because he wanted to join the revolution. That guy swore allegiance to him, but when he saw the headless corpse, he also vomited directly on Kvanak. The girl was surprised that this story was about that same Austin. The emperor added that back then the people in front of him had not even changed properly. Yusufir was shocked by the end of the story, because many years ago Austin said that Kavana was to blame for seeing that horror. After the guy finished the story, a smile appeared on the girl's face, which soon turned into laughter. The emperor told this story so that she would not worry so much. Austin forgot this story long ago, and he wanted the girl to forget about it after a couple of swims. The empress was very surprised that seeing a mutilated corpse at an early age and seasickness for Kvanak were the same little things. How cruel was his fate if such a cruel sight was something insignificant for him? Yusufir really did not like to recognize the real Konovac Radionsky, instead of believing the rumors about his tyranny and cruelty. Our red-haired boy ran up to the emperor's cabin and knocked on the door. The ruler just said coldly that he had finally appeared. The emperor was angry that the doctor took so long to come. Yusufir tried to calm her husband down, explaining that the doctor could simply be sleeping at such a late hour. The doctor apologized, that we had to wait so long for him and that he was just collecting medicine, to which Kvanak ordered him to come in quickly. The doctor bowed to the empress and introduced himself. His name was Simon and he was the chief physician of the imperial palace. Yusufir noticed that Simon was still a child. The girl introduced herself and thanked him for coming at such an early hour. Kwana was furious that he arrived late, and now he stood and did nothing. The doctor began to examine the girl. Simon began to tremble with excitement. Yusufir asked how old Simon was. It turned out that the boy would soon turn 18. It was surprising to her that at such an early age he worked at the palace. The girl thought about the genius of the doctor. The emperor was not very pleased with Yusufir's praise, to which the girl explained that it was unlikely that there was an ignorant person at the palace. Kvanak told Yusufir that the boy had an outstanding memory, and not everyone knows human anatomy by heart. Therefore, the emperor decided that such a person would be useful to him and took him to serve in the palace. The girl directly told the doctor that he was capable. After this comment, Simon became shy and replied that he was not that good yet, but he would improve. The emperor noticed that Simon was not a very talkative person, but apparently he liked the empress. The girl was glad, because as an empress she should be close to the people. Kwana was a little annoyed that he and Simon were holding hands. Yusufir realized that this was wrong. After all, now she and the emperor were bound by marriage. She timidly apologized, lowering her eyes to the floor. The emperor was not happy. He said that he emphasized this situation not so that she would apologize. Yusufir explained that her younger brother was the same age and simply felt sorry for the doctor. The empress said that when he hugged her in the carriage, she realized that the warmth of another person helped her calm down. Yusufir said that she would be more careful in future. The emperor felt irritated by such pitiful excuses. Kavana gave the girls small pieces of something. He explained that this is medicine and it should be bitter. But instead of a bitter taste, she tasted raspberries, and she was very pleased that Kavana knew her preference.
The man smiled and said that there were still a lot of dried raspberries, and Yusufir can take it as much as she wants.
Kwana noticed to himself how little she ate, like a little rabbit. He asked his wife to go to bed because it was already quite late, and promised that it would soon become easier. The girl was worried that Kavana would not stay with her, but would go to work a little more. But he noticed that he could not leave her until she felt better, so he took the necessary documents with him. In the dim light of a candle, so as not to disturb the girl's sleep, the emperors sat and did their work. Yusufir was pleasantly surprised that he stayed nearby. She regretted that she had such a bad opinion in her previous life. After all, even when she does not behave according to etiquette, her husband is not angry with her, but on the contrary, he is worried. It seemed that he sincerely wanted their relationship to become real and sincere love to arise. But now it was too early to think about her feelings until she was sure that she had prevented war. She had a dream where Dakvid reminded her of his grandiose plans. The girl was still thinking that as soon as they found out about her infertility, she would be thrown out and a bloody war would begin again. Memories from a past life reminded me more and more of themselves. Yusfir realized that she had lost her vigilance and was afraid that he would find out about her weakness. She watched the Emperor's work, dipping a pen into the inkwell from time to time. The bright rays of the sun woke up our heroine. When she got up, she noticed that the Emperor was not there. The maid asked how the mistress was feeling. With a smile, the girl thanked her for her concern and said that the rest had done her good. Feeling much better, Yusfir realized that she did not want to spend the entire time on the ship in a stuffy room. A light sea breeze immediately hit her face, blowing her blonde hair. The girl was amazed by the beauty of the endless sea, which gently turned into the blue of the heavenly blue. Two Imperials greeted the new ruler. There was some kind of wariness in their voice, although she noticed this yesterday when she talked with Austin. She understood why they treated this way. After all, to them, she was an unknown foreigner. Yusfir did not understand why the Emperor decided to introduce a sorceress into the family. After all, if he had married an aristocrat from his country, this would have strengthened his power much more. The girl understood that she had suddenly appeared as a princess from some small northern country, and their relationship was understandable. Simon ran towards her as fast as he could. After all, he had been looking for a girl for quite a long time. She emphasized that there was no need to worry so much and assured that she began to feel much better. The doctor said that there was a fairly strong wind, and the Empress could have caught a cold. Kwana was happy to find his wife. Raising the fragile body of his wife, the Emperor said that they would go back because the ship was shaking quite a lot due to the waves. Kwana was worried that the girl might fall and injure herself. Yusfir said embarrassedly that people were looking at them. The Emperor asked her if she was not very worried that he did not observe etiquette. The Empress said she was worried about his reputation. At that same moment, the Emperor remembered that he had forgotten to tell Yusfir something. Holding the girl close to him, the Emperor gently whispered in her ear that he was going to this to be able to do this. Kwanahu never liked it when people had to force themselves into the bounds of etiquette. Therefore, he carried out several reforms. The people who judged and looked down on are long gone. The rest respect their emperor and will not condemn him because of some etiquette. The man gently laid the fragile Yusfir on the bed, and he brought the girl several interesting books so that she would not be bored in the cabin. Yusfir thanked her husband. She was amazed that there were even books on the ship. While the emperor knew that the journey would be long, he took several interesting books from his library. The girl loved to read very much, but lately she didn't even have free minutes for her favorite activity. Yusfir was incredibly happy, because in Achaea even fragments of these books could be found with great difficulty. And now she held this book in good condition in her hands. The girl had heard that the Imperial Library was the largest on the entire continent. She noticed that Kwana also liked to read, and the more she learned about the Emperor, the more surprised she was. Yusfir was surprised that literature aroused his interest. After all, the guy literally grew up on the battlefield. Our heroine again remembered her past life, when books and loneliness were her only passion. Only by reading and experiencing the difficulties of other people could she, at least for a moment, forget about her loneliness and sadness. The Empress had the amazing feeling of sharing her favorite pastime with someone else. After reading a little, the girl fell asleep with the book in her hands. Her sleep was interrupted by Kwana, delighting the girl with the news that they had already arrived in the Empire. The Empress was surprised by the beauty of the port. The man told Yusfir that he would soon give a welcoming speech. He asked the girl to just stay next to him so that his people could see her. Kwana said he wanted to throw a grand wedding where he would like to present his bride. The Emperor understood that the wedding in Achaea was just a formality, and Yusuf suggested that the people get to know her after the wedding. The chief maid immediately came out to the Empress and introduced herself. Marianne promised to do everything in her power. The maid showed Yusuf the palace. The palace was simply gorgeous, and the girl was surprised at how quickly the Rodion Empire was developing. She remembered that in a past life, the Rodion Empire won the war without much difficulty. She was very surprised by the fact that it was easier for people to recognize the emperor as a barbarian than to recognize his merits as a ruler. The Empress's gaze fell on a building that she had never read about in books. The maid asked the girl if she would like to visit that building. Yusfir was very surprised. because this building looked exactly the same as the palace in which she lived in IKEA. But today she refused to go there, believing that she had had enough for today. The servant said that she would take the girl to the main palace. She also said that the second floor was intended for future heirs, which made the Empress's heart sank. Yusfir was shocked by the luxury of her room. Mariana, knowing that the girl was tired after a long journey, took a hot bath. The maid said that she would be away to pay special attention to the preparation of the chambers. Tonight will be our first night together in the palace. The emperor was pleasantly surprised that he was gone for a short time, and the atmosphere in the room had changed quite a lot. Yusfir noted that this was all the merit of the maids. Kavana guessed that since this would be their first night in the castle, that's why his wife dressed like that. The empress, a little embarrassed, asked if this dress suited her. The man smiled and said that it suits her very well, but he promised that he would not lay a finger on her without her consent. Without finishing, Kvanak suggested that they go to bed. After all, they were quite tired today. A little embarrassed and afraid of seeming stupid, the girl asked what could happen between a man and a woman. After all, this was something new for her. Yusfir was confident that the emperor lacked this experience. He smiled and asked if she really liked more experienced men. Kavana explained that experience is not taken out of thin air, and if the empress wants, they can agree. The emperor, seeing his wife's great embarrassment, suggested that they just hold hands first. He offered to go to bed together if she was willing to go a little further. From embarrassment, the girl's cheeks were covered with a crimson blush, and the question flashed through her thoughts as to what she should do in this situation. The girl, under the pretext of an uncomfortable dress, went into the next room. But I didn't take into account that the buttons are on the back. The empress asked the maids to come and help her unbutton. The emperor offered to help his wife and began to gradually unfasten the buttons of her uncomfortable dress. Yusfir was amazed at how sweet and caring the emperor turned out to be and thanked him. I couldn't help but want the blush to leave her face. The girl still felt awkward. After all, maids usually helped her. The emperor asked her if she had changed her mind about practicing and holding hands. Yusfir asked him if the emperor was feeling uneasy. Events developed quite quickly because on the ship they slept in different rooms. The man sighed and told her that she was wrong. After all, when she slept in bed, he fell asleep on the chair next to her. To Yusfir's surprise, the emperor explained that he had noticed on the ship that the girls were having nightmares. The girl noticed that the emperor was not at all what she had imagined. Before meeting him in person, the girl was a little afraid, trusting more in rumors about his cruelty. Kavana stopped the girl's speech by gently tucking her hair behind her ear. He admitted that he really liked her, and that he was worried that the feeling was not mutual. Gently running his hand over his wife's cheek, the man said that she was the only one he needed. As she fell asleep, the girl said that she also really liked the emperor. In our heroine's head, there were still thoughts that the emperor only needed a guardian bearing her name, and should not forget this. The girl woke up in a sunlit room. She noticed a bouquet of red roses standing on the nightstand near the bed. A maid approached the empress and asked how the first night in the imperial palace went. The girl thanked Mariana for the fragrant herbs, which helped her fall asleep fairly quickly and feel cheerful in the morning. Yusfir and herself noticed that the head maid was polite and courteous, but the girl could not shake the feeling that Marianne was afraid of her. The empress became a little sad from this attitude. She understood that becoming depressed would be a waste of time. After all, she still had a lot of work to do. Yusfir asked me to make her some simple breakfast. She said that she really wanted to go somewhere. With some disbelief, Mariana asked where the empress intended to go. With a smile on her face, the girl said that she really wanted to go to the imperial library. When the girl entered the library, her eyes widened. This was the first time she had seen such a number of different and rare books. The library was simply huge, and the number of books was almost 4 floors. In the middle of the library stood a huge frame in the form of a snow-white tree. Yusfir was delighted, because there were even poems and legends that she had never seen in IKEA, and they were passed on only by word of mouth. But now the girl understood that she had to learn more about magic. She asked the librarian where this section was. The librarian said that this was a secret section, but the girl could use it whenever she wanted. The empress's eyes ran around the shelves with hundreds of books. She hoped to find the rarest books in existence, and perhaps they contained the key to the secret of the guardians. A dark green book caught her eye, and the girl took it and sat down at one of the many tables. Yusfir was surprised that she found the book she needed so quickly. The dawn of the Age of Wizards happened many centuries ago, so she did not expect to find any clues in the library. The title of the book most likely referred to the Guardians, because the book was called The Emergence of Magic on the Northern Continent, or The History of the Family. Yusfir carefully read every page of the book, hoping that this book told much more about the Guardians than people knew. More than 300 years ago, horror itself invaded the lands of people. Then the human race and the serene bed of the Silver Forest, protected by God, were in danger. Then, hearing a desperate cry to help the goddess, a representative of the Catatel family came and vowed to protect her until the end of time. The goddess Fakar was happy and, in gratitude, endowed the Catatel family with a special gift. But the guardian's soul was tied to the Silver Forest, and the guardians would never be able to live like ordinary people. The Empress's eyes lit up when she learned that the Wood Elf's friend Janisa Catathel was one whose powers went beyond human capabilities, and her child was a blessing. The Forest Elves, even after hundreds of years, missed her greatly. The Empress asked herself the question of how she could have a child, and why this speaks of enormous power. After all, in their textbooks, that girl was an ordinary guardian who awakened more than 300 years ago. The girl thought that if she met the Forest Elves, she could learn much more about Janice. She heard someone calling her. Turning around, the girl saw Kvanak, who was surprised that she was still sitting in the library. The Emperor asked what made the girl skip meals. He jokingly asked if she liked to faint. They were already going down the steps. The man reported that the maids were very surprised that their mistress had not returned to her chambers all day. The wife apologized and explained that she was drawn into reading and did not notice how time flew by. The Emperor was confused why Yusfir was looking at him so pitifully. The moonlight reflected in her eyes. Kwana explained that he was not at all angry with the girl for her desire to spend more time in the library. He was worried, knowing Yusfir was in poor health and she did not care about it at all. The husband was amazed at the girl's love of reading. He didn't expect this to happen even once. The man noticed that it is worth paying more attention to Yusfir's health, and he offered to follow him to the greenhouse. The girl was amazed by the beauty of the greenhouse. There were many flowers, a fountain in which the moon and stars were reflected with huge pink lotuses. The man expressed the hope that at least the desire to see the greenhouse could encourage his wife to go outside more often. The girl admired the beauty and variety of flowers. She thought they were simply wonderful. Kavana asked his wife if she liked it here. She answered in the affirmative, and she admitted that she especially liked little flowers like those over there. The Emperor was glad that Yusfir had cheered up. He asked her to come here more often to admire the flowers here. With the most serious look, he asked the girl not to forget to eat regularly, taking care of her health. Kwana assured her that he had ordered flowers to be planted around the new building, in the hope that she would like it there. The girl clarified how long ago that building was built. She remembered that she saw him through the window. She was surprised to assume that the Emperor had built it, and this greenhouse especially for her. Yusfir did not understand why the man continued to care about her so much. It seemed quite strange to her. Here she felt strange vibrations of magic. Kavana saw that something incomprehensible was happening to his wife. He asked her what happened to her. She shrugged it off that everything was fine. She assured that the flowers were so beautiful that she simply could not look away. It seemed to our heroine that after leaving Akia, magic was absolutely inaccessible to her. And I decided to try to talk to this flower. The girl touched the white petal with her index finger. He shouted, "No, why did you come here? For what? Run and don't look back. Run away quickly." Yusfir looked over her shoulder at her husband. She didn't understand what was happening. The man began to worry about the girl, asking what happened to her. Our heroine looked pleadingly at the Emperor. The flower urged her to leave immediately, otherwise she would die here. That conversation took place in the greenhouse a week ago. The man asked the maid if she had thought about his proposal. She replied that her answer would not change, and he still couldn't understand why she was so stubborn. And he convinced that this was all for the sake of them all. The head of the servants began to shout that she had worked so long to get this position, that she worked for this for many years. The interlocutor was sure that working was good, but he was surprised that for her work was more important than the life of her younger sister. The woman asked how he knew about Edith. He replied that it didn't matter, and he was sure that his request was not so difficult, that she would simply need to report to him what their dear Empress was doing and saying. And since she herself works in the palace, there shouldn't be any problems with this. The woman tried to object to him in response. But he was sure that since she had already come to the meeting with him, it meant that she was initially interested in his proposal. Marianne, and it was she, clenched her fists from the emotions overwhelming her. The man was sure that they could become closer to her, and asked her consent. The time was approaching sunset. The golden farewell light of the setting luminary spread over the city and the water surface. The woman walked slowly through the streets and returned home. Along the way, she reflected on the current situation and the possibilities that would open up to her if she agreed to the deal. After some time, she opened the door. One of the many and no different from each other in this house. A young girl was lying on the bed. Marianne informed her of her return. She asked for forgiveness for coming home later, making excuses that recently there has been more work in the palace. The woman tiredly sat down on a stool near her sister's bed. Marianne was taking a bottle out of the inner pocket of her jacket. She told Sister Edith that she first needed to take some medicine. The girl felt bad and did not argue. Marianne looked at her sick younger sister lying there. She knew that she suffered from silidiosis, and she was very worried that her only relative was suffering every day due to an incurable disease. Then in the greenhouse, the man assured that he was well informed, and that according to rumors, this disease began to quickly spread throughout the empire, and that if the sick person cannot regularly take magical medicines, then at any moment he could become numb and die. In their world, it was difficult to find an intelligent wizard, and drug prices were rising rapidly. Unfortunately, not all of those drugs helped against diseases, and some were even dangerous or poisonous. Of course, all this was depressing. The man convinced Mariana that if she cooperated with them, she would receive a lot of money. He convinced her that common people could not even dream of such a thing. The woman clarified who it was with us. I asked who was behind him. He assured that he could tell only if she accepted his offer. He advised her to think carefully about it. And now Marianne sat by the bed of her sick sister and wondered what she should do now. He cursed to himself. A guy in a business suit with green hair was holding out a stack of papers. He told His Majesty that this was an estimate of the taxes collected in the western region for that quarter, what he asked him to provide. He added that there were also drafts of possible reforms to the tax system, and asked to get acquainted with them. Kavana briefly thanked him. He was sure that at this rate they would have time to prepare a plan in time for the next meeting of Parliament. The guy announced this time the meeting would be even more intense. He believed that conservative aristocrats would do anything to prevent their tax reform. The emperor was sure that if this happened, then next time he would fail the bureaucratic exam which he himself insisted on. The guy was sure that they still adhered to the old beliefs, and they believed that the aristocracy should rule the people. Kavana, gritting his teeth, said that it was they who overlooked and allowed the battle slave to ascend to the throne. The guy reminded that it was not permission, but submission. He was sure that they could be betrayed at any moment, due to the fact that the aristocrats had to submit then. The emperor, getting up from his chair, said that he considered them old foxes, and he wondered whether he should deal with them the same way as with the previous ruler. The guy was sure that he wouldn't do that. After all, he believed that the gentleman's soul was full of mercy. Kavana stood at the window. Speaking about mercy, he assured that this is not entirely true, that he simply did not want to shed blood again. He suddenly remembered how Yusfir said that she liked him too, and now he was wondering what if she found out about his past. Will she still say that she likes him and call him a hero? The girl was sitting down on the garden path in the greenhouse. The maid was surprised that the lady was still in the garden. Marianne said she listened to her call. She confirmed that he was faithful. Yusfir stood up from the flowers. She told the head maid that she wanted to ask her something. She became wary and pulled herself together. Yusfir smiled. Mariana came closer and said that she heard the lady calling her. The empress invited her to take a walk. After all, I thought that just standing would be too tiring. The girl was glad that it was warm today. She said that this greenhouse was so beautiful that it simply took her breath away when she first came here. The empress was delighted with the flowers. She admitted that she had never seen anything like this in her homeland. Then when her husband saw Yusfir's confusion, she convinced him that everything was fine with her, and she continued the conversation with the flower, clarifying what he meant. The plant reported that a woman from her circle, her personal maid, continued to meet strange people here. The flower reported that those people said that they wanted to harm the empress. The girl guessed that they were talking about Mariana. Yusfir asked the plant for permission to look at his memories and what the maid said then. The flower agreed. assuring that they were completely on her side. And so our heroine found out that someone was persuading her personal servant to cooperate. She doubts and refuses, but they convince her by promising a generous monetary reward for the treatment of her sister. The girl was brought out of the trance of communicating with the plant by Mariana's voice. She called the Empress. Yusfir asked her for forgiveness, assuring that she was just staring at the flower bed. She asked the maid if she liked the flowers. She replied that she considered them beautiful creatures. The Empress was surprised at this. Marianne remembered how the teenager rejoiced at a small flowered red rose, decorating her hair with it. She said that something so beautiful could be lost so easily. She admitted that it scared her. The young woman admitted that her younger sister loved flowers much more than she did. Yusfir was surprised that the maid had a sister. She said that she was 10 years younger than her. Mariana said that their parents died early, and the responsibility for raising the girl fell on her shoulders. The maid said that she and her sister had been living outside the castle since she became a maid. Yusfir was sure that it was not easy for her. Marianne wanted her sister to also become a maid and work with her in the palace, but her health did not allow her. The Empress asked what was wrong with the girl. The woman reported that her sister had been suffering from solidiosis for a long time, and she is trying in every way to get her medicine. She asked the Empress for forgiveness for information that was unimportant to her. Yusfir denied it. She looked the maid in the eye and assured her that she had called her because she wanted to talk to her about it first. After all, they saw her every day. But Yusfir knew nothing at all about her personal maid. She assured her that in the future she would become a very close person to her. Therefore, I would like to try to get to know her better, even if I was a little late in doing so. The girl understood that Marianne treated her so distantly, only because in her eyes she was a strange foreigner who suddenly became her mistress. Even though she was cold with the girl, Yusfir should have tried to get closer to her earlier. Then nothing would have happened. Yusfir has already made a vow to change in order to prevent what happened in her past life, but she still couldn't get rid of her habit of distancing herself from people instead of getting to know them. She decided that now everything was supposed to be different. After all, she was no longer locked within the four walls of a queen who was killed by her own brother. Now she was the Empress, and she had a responsibility. Yusfir asked the maid not to worry, and she promised to help find a cure for her. She took the dumbfounded woman's hands. Mariana asked why she needed this. The girl was surprised what a stupid question it was. After all, the maid was her person. With this statement, she dumbfounded the woman even more. Kwana was surprised. He couldn't understand how Yusfir got to this part of the castle so far to find him. The blonde remembered that her husband himself had come a long way last time to find her. She asked if she had interfered with his business. The guy with green hair stammered something to say that they had business here. But Kavana quickly shut him up, shoving papers at him, assuring him that she had not disturbed them at all. The man told her that they had just finished. Yusfir was glad that she came on time. She invited His Majesty to share a meal with her. He happily agreed. After some time, various delicious and fresh dishes were served on the living room table. There was baked chicken, vegetables, salads, sweets. The table was decorated with vases of flowers and candles in candelabra. Yusfir cut with a knife on her plate while talking with her husband. She said she was sure he was surprised by her sudden proposal. And she admitted that she was ready to hear his refusal. Her husband took a sip from his glass. He said there was no need to doubt it. After all, she had chosen the time for the meal so well. Kavana said that he was glad that his wife personally invited him. The girl did not understand why her face suddenly turned red. She said the chef worked hard, but I was sure that he had to try even harder today because today they had lunch together. Kwana was surprised. He thought that everything was as usual, but the girl did not agree with him. But she immediately closed her mouth, almost blurting out that she was eating in the library. The emperor asked his wife if she was sure that everything was fine with her. He was concerned about his wife's health. Kwana ter obi. He told his wife that they were lucky to meet, but he was worried that something could happen to her, and he won't be able to immediately find out about it until she tells him about it herself. But Yusfir at that time was immersed in her thoughts. Secrets of the Silver Forest, scalidiosis. Her husband told her that from now on they would have dinner together. The girl was surprised by his decision, because he was such a busy man. He replied that he would not want his wife to lose consciousness, but to start eating normally. Kwana handed his wife a piece of pie with red jelly. I advised her to try it, remembering that she loved raspberries. The emperor asked Yusfir what happened. After all, if she herself says that she understands the degree to which he is busy, and yet she asked me to give her some time. The man paused expectantly. He believed that the girl wanted to tell him something important. Yusfir began to tell him that her maid was in trouble. She asked whether her husband knew Mariana. He assured that he himself invited her to the palace. He knew that this girl had undergone an internship for a long time at a specialized educational institution for servants, and that thanks to her outstanding skills and good manners, Marianne received the position of chief maid at court. Kwana said that the maid regularly left the castle, and he knew there was a reason for that, but he didn't even think that everything was so serious. The emperor believed that because of this whole situation with her sister's incurable illness, Marianne would not be able to concentrate on work at all. Yusfir asked if they could transport the maid's sister to them. She believed that it would be better for everyone if Marianne could take care of the girl and not leave her for a long time. Kwana asked if he could place a seriously ill sick girl in the imperial hospital. The man said that it just so happened that Simon was planning to start studying silidiosis in the near future, together with the best doctors of the empire. He assured that there would be the latest high-quality equipment, and Marianne would not have to worry, because the hospital was not far from the palace. Yusfir was glad to have this opportunity. Kwana smiled. He said that as soon as his empress wished for something, the empire would do everything for her to please her. Yusfir was surprised. She thanked her husband, and she said that she was afraid to imagine what would happen to Marianne without him. The man said that he only followed her advice. He gently touched his wife's finger with his finger, and he said that she should thank herself. The girl sighed. She told her husband that his consent and support helped a lot. Therefore, she believed that they both deserve gratitude. The emperor was pleased with himself and agreed with her. And the girl thought why then she was the only one who felt somehow awkward. She thought that she needed to quickly finish eating and leave. Kavana called out to his wife. He said there was something on her face. The girl asked where exactly. Then he carefully wiped the stuck piece of pie from her cheek. She thanked him meekly, embarrassed. The emperor leaned towards his wife and began to say something tenderly to her. But they were interrupted by a servant bursting into the room. He called out to His Majesty from the threshold. Approaching, he asked Kvanak to urgently check one document. But only then did he notice the embarrassment and color on the girl's face and the dissatisfied appearance of the gentleman. Then he timidly apologized for the untimeliness. Yusfir was still recovering from the rush of blood to her face. The emperor asked Oslin what kind of documents he had. And our heroine thought that if it wasn't just her imagination, Kvanna definitely wanted to kiss her. The assistant was already in a hurry to leave, saying that he was glad to see you. The emperor said goodbye to him and saw him soon. And Yusfir grabbed her head and asked herself what she should do. She admitted to herself that she had been having such strange feelings around Kvanna lately. Mariana couldn't believe her ears and asked Yusfir again whether what she told her was true. She was glad that her sister would be admitted to the imperial hospital. The empress confirmed this with a smile. She assured that she had already discussed this matter with His Majesty, and soon a place will be prepared for the maid's sister. Then Marianne will be able to transport her to the palace. The maid knew that only officials and members of the ruling dynasty had the right to be patients in the imperial hospital, and that someone like her couldn't even take a step on the threshold. Yusfir asked what was the matter. The maid said that she was a commoner, and she was only lucky enough to get this job by the grace of the emperor. Marianne was sure that if they were in another country, she would not even dare to look up at the empress's hem. Yusfir assured that in the Radon Empire, people are judged by their skills and not by rank. She took the maid's hands, and she said that all this time, she was doing her job better than anyone else. Therefore, she asked not to say that she did not deserve such treatment towards herself and her sister. Yusfir insisted that she could not become a good empress if she did not take care of those who were dear to her. The maid was trying to tell the empress something, but she didn't let her say it, assuring her that she didn't want to neglect her. Therefore, she hoped that Marianne would accept her help. The woman was crying. She remembered her seriously ill sister, and she reproached herself that she could harm such a good person as the empress by agreeing to that deal with the baron. She fell to her knees and began to ask Her Majesty for forgiveness. Marianne admitted that one person was secretly contacting her, and that he promised to help get the medicine if she agreed to give him all the information about the Empress. She believed that she deserved to be punished for hesitating. Yusfir understood the whole situation, and that her sister's life depended on Mariana's decision and the medicine that she was promised. And she assured that she was delighted that she did not immediately agree to that proposal. The head maid wanted to object. Yusfir asked her to calm down, assuring her that everything was in order, and asked her to tell her who made such an offer to her. Marianne wiped tears from her face. She said that the person who contacted her was a well-known civil servant, Baron Edwin. Yusfir admitted that this is the first time she has heard this name, and she couldn't understand why he needed detailed information about her. The maid said she wasn't sure, but she believed that Baron Edwin was a rather slippery and cunning person. He once showed great disrespect for the former emperor, and has since lived in hiding, fearing retribution. At the right time, the Baron supported the revolution only to change his position. Currently he holds the post of civil servant. Yusfir realized that he did not agree with the idea of a new emperor, and he joined him only for his own safety and benefit. Marianne confirmed the correctness of her mistress's guesses. She reported that Baron Baynard, who made the greatest contribution to the advancement of the revolution, refused to assign any title to him. And other aristocrats who participated in the revolution, including Baron Edwin, were not entitled to new titles. His Majesty granted him a large estate as a reward. But soon, through the fault of Baron Edwin himself, everything there fell into decay, and now he was forced to work as a low-ranking official in the imperial palace. Yusfir thought about it. She understood that the main idea of the revolution was to eliminate the sense of privilege of the ruling class. And it was natural that those who towered above everyone would continue to resist. But she did not understand why the Baron needed to follow her, because she herself had never had power in the political arena. Marianne did not know the answer to her mistress's question, but she asked her to be careful. She remembered how he used "we" in that conversation, and she believed that at least one other person was clearly involved in that case. Yusfir asked to tell her where the estate was located, which the Baron received as a reward. The woman said it was somewhere near the northeastern border of the empire. There was territory of another people nearby, and just to the north there was an area controlled by Achaea. It dawned on Yusfir. It turned out that Baron Edwin lived near her homeland of Achaea. She assumed that the person who collaborated with that man was her older brother. The girl looked at the communication artifact that was now lying on the table. He was surrounded by a cold but quite bright glow. Yusfir was amazed that she did not immediately realize that there was one person who wanted to control her every step. Dagvid still didn't trust the girl and tried to keep an eye on her with the help of other people, which scared her a little. Mariana, noticeably nervous, turned to the girl. She asks her consent to contact Mr. Edwin. The servants knew that the Empress would be against this. She explained that it was impossible to blame him now, so that the real traitors would not hide, and there would be an opportunity to find out who was behind this crime. The woman noticed that it was dangerous for the Empress to speak now. Therefore, I was ready to take on the role of a double agent. At Yusfir's surprised look, the maid told her what to pretend, that he will accept the Baron's offer and will gain his trust and try to find out as much as possible. Yusfir was touched by this act. She warned the woman that she might get hurt. To that warning, the woman replied that everything would be fine. Be that as it may, the Empress helped save her sister, and now Marianne was ready to devote her life to serving the Empress. Bowing at the girl's feet, the maid begged to give her a chance. After talking with the maid, the girl followed into the imperial garden. She touched the soft pink petal, wanting it to share more memories. Someone's footsteps were heard in the garden, but the girl didn't pay any attention to that. Turning around, she saw Kvanak. The man wondered what his wife was thinking about. In response, the Empress noted that wherever she went there were very beautiful flowers. To change the topic of conversation, Yusfir pointed to a flower and explained that this species is very difficult to make bloom, and the gardeners did a great job. Kvana looked at the beauty of the flower. He thought that perhaps it was as his beloved said. The girl mentioned that she told Marianne to bring her sister to the palace and that the maid was very happy. She smiled and added that now the maids will take good care of the younger sister. The Empress remembered how tightly the maid squeezed her hand, and how she perked up and found a new meaning in life. This made the girl feel a little uneasy. After all, she felt it. Yusfir caught herself wondering if she deserved such an attitude towards herself. It seemed to her that she had done practically nothing. The girl apologized for sharing this. After all, she had so many thoughts in her head. It seemed to her that it would not be worthwhile to burden the emperor with this. Moonlight played on Kwana's hair. He was amazed that every day he walked along this road to his office, but had never noticed all the beauty of the flowers until that moment. He noted that he also never thought about how difficult it would be for his gardener, if not for the attentiveness of his husband. He noticed that the girl quite often drew attention to things that he had not even thought about. The same was the case with Marianne. After all, the emperor was a little cautious about her. He didn't even think about finding out what was going on with the maid. Kavana noted that noticing something like that and caring about those around him seemed like a very difficult task. The husband extended his hand, helping the girl up. He was very pleased to be convinced every day that his chosen one was a wonderful person. At the girl's confused look, the emperor said that he believed that she was the one capable of being responsible for his people. Kwana gently kissed the girl's hand. Drops of water from the fountain seemed to merge with the light evening coolness. The flowers were silent witnesses to this wonderful moment. Every time the emperor complimented the girl, she felt a little awkward. She remembered what secret she was hiding from him, the secret of the keeper and the agreement with her brother. It seemed to Yusfir that she would never be able to become a real empress while she was silent about all this, but even so, she wanted to at least try. The girl opened a small box illuminated by magical light. She picked up the communications artifact and heard her brother's voice. Her heart sank for a few moments. She told her brother that she was glad to hear from him. Dakvid was surprised that there was no news from her. He was surprised that Yusfir was still trying to please the emperor. The girl asked her to forgive her for making him worry about her. Her brother asked how she lived in the empire. The blonde said that everything was not as bad as she first expected. And I thought to myself that even if Marianne became her double agent, this did not mean that she alone had to collect information. Yusfir believed that it was worth checking whether it was her brother who assigned that man, Baron Edwan, to her, and she thought that she should have tried to please Dakvid. She voiced that the emperor was very suspicious, and she complained that she could not move freely. The brother was surprised at this. He was sure that Kvana cared about his new wife. The girl insisted that she did not understand what was going on. The brother asked if she really thought that he could send his dear sister to a foreign country all alone. He assured that he had long since taken care to introduce a devoted person into the upper strata of society. Yusfir realized that everything was as she expected, realizing that behind Baron Edwan most likely stood her brother. She said out loud that her current situation was very encouraging. The girl asked who her brother's trusted man was. She assured that if she knew who was on her side, it would be easier to act. The brother was not sure that this was necessary. He said that she should do what he told her. He was sure that if the girl began to interfere in politics without a good reason, then this could only add unnecessary problems to them. He advised me to just listen to my brother. David said that if she really wanted to help, then in principle she could. He reported that the empire was talking about the recent implementation of tax reform. And despite the radical plan of that reform, the conservative aristocracy does not have a negative attitude towards it. Dakvid asked to know what Kwana did to achieve such support. He assured that if they were going to destroy the empire, then there was no need to create discord between the emperor and the conservatives. Yusfir replied that they too were making their contribution to the revolution, and if you intervene without properly preparing for it, then Akia could not stand it. Dakvid assured his sister that she was in too much of a hurry, to which she answered her brother that she was just worried about their native Akia. He said that if the sister was so worried, then instead of making empty guesses, it would be better to let her look for Kvanak's weaknesses. The guy assured that he would not like to force her to whisper the thoughts they needed to the emperor in bed. The girl was shocked by this assumption and her brother's thoughts. Dakvid expressed the hope that her heart still ached for the fate of their native country. He asked his dear sister to contact him more often. When the connection ended, Dakvid was furious. He started cursing like hell. He was angry with his sister for pretending to know something, and he didn't believe that Yusfir was actually worried about Akia. He thought that she simply did not want to lose everyone's love, that my sister considered herself a heroine, but in reality, all she could do was feel sorry for herself. That's why she agreed to that humiliating marriage of convenience. He shouted that if Yusfir really cares about their country, then she must fight to the end. Dakvid thought that everyone was only thinking about how to destroy his native Akia. He became cowardly with rage. He told himself that his sister knew nothing about the lengths he went to protect the country. The guy sat at the table with his fists clenched tightly. After all, when he began to rule instead of their stupid father, he fell ill due to the death of his wife and did not care about the fate of Akia. Dakvid was only 14 years old, and none of his subjects were sincerely devoted to him, the young crown prince behind whose back the sick king was hiding. He remembered how Yusfir called him brother in a thin voice, how there were tears in her eyes and she said that she really missed her mother. Then his family and his country demanded help. He understood that he would devote his whole life to this, to save and protect them. He had to go through blood and betrayal, through pain and loss. Dakvid remembered the admiring, hopeful voices of the adults. They said that the princess had awakened, that she became their guardian. They were surprised that the table had already passed for centuries, and they considered this direct evidence that the Silver Forest was still on the side of Akia. The guy heard all this through the slightly open door. The men were surprised that Yusfir became the guardian, and not Crown Prince Dakvid. And if you thought about it, it turned out that heaven itself decided that a princess should ascend the throne. The guy accidentally overheard all this and tried to understand it for himself. He remembered the slap in the face that his sister gave him for no apparent reason. True, she later asked him for forgiveness, making excuses that apparently magic had suddenly affected her body. She expressed the hope that her brother would come to her position. The guy smiled and assumed that it must be very difficult for his sister right now. But he understood to himself that she could betray him. Duckwill went to the window. He told Yusfir that the fact that she was a guardian in the end had no effect on the development of Akia, and all her achievements, all her magic went only to isolate their country from the outside world. He thought that stupid people did not see this, and therefore they presented Yusfir as the true heir. David thought this was simply terrible. He touched the glass of the window with his fingers. The one who entered told His Highness that there was not much left. The hooded figure approached the prince at a brisk pace. He assured that soon the whole world would see how he would behead the vile emperor with his own hands, sprinkling the ground with his blood. And then the continent will be in his power. Dakvid agreed that there was not much left. He wanted Akia to prosper. But in order to do this, he believed it was necessary to make sacrifices, even those that might seem monstrous. He said that although he was not a guardian, he would still prove that he could become the ruler of the entire continent. The maids were ready to help the mistress. Marina clarified that she wanted to meet with people from Parliament. The maid was pouring golden tea into a porcelain cup. Yusfir admitted that she believed that she needed to know how the help to the empire came about. And she clarified with Mariana what she had told her before. According to her, it turned out that in total there were 20 people in Parliament. 10 came from the aristocracy, and the same number were commoners. And for the adoption of a new law, the support and consent of more than 13 people was required. Yusfir was surprised by the equal number of aristocrats and commoners in the emperor's legislative chamber. She realized that the struggle that would unfold when putting forward the law would be fierce. She understood that members of parliament definitely had to be those who understood the current political situation better than others. From yesterday's conversation, Yusfir realized that her brother Dakvid already knew about the proposed tax reform. He didn't think that Baron Edwin, a low-ranking official, could have received information about that. After all, the reform has not even come into force yet. Yusfir was sure that one of the high-ranking aristocrats served her brother. He whispered all the news of the empire into his ear. The Empress told Marianne that she would like to meet some of the aristocrats, but I thought that it would look too politicized. The maid said what she heard, that ladies from those aristocratic families that were part of Parliament often socialized at tea parties, and she suggested to Her Highness that she arrange something similar and invite those ladies. Then everyone would take it for an ordinary social event, and then Yusfir would be able to find out the information she wanted. The Empress thanked the maid for the hint. She said it could be a great move. Marianne with a bow assured the lady that she would prepare everything in a few days. The woman was asking where to make an appointment. Yusfir began to think. After all, since it was a tea party, something beautiful and luxurious was needed. A few days later, the maid greeted the guests. She said that the Empress was already waiting for them and took them to her mistress. Bowing, she asked to follow her. The ladies sighed enthusiastically, looking at their surroundings. They admitted that it was the first time they had seen such a magnificent garden. The blonde said that this marriage was political, and she was a simple princess from a small country. She said that there were a lot of rumors about it. Another said that it was unexpected that the emperor made so much effort to please his wife, and now she was burning with a desire to find out what kind of person she was. The empress herself was already in a hurry to meet them. She looked simply luxurious. As she approached, she smiled and briefly but politely said hello. She said that she had never seen the lady before. The ladies each began to express their delight in their own way. They said that this place was incredibly beautiful, and they were surprised that all this was given to her by their emperor. The invitees sat down at the table. Representatives of the most noble families gathered here. But the leader among them, of course, was Her Majesty. One of the particularly confident people spoke. What do we know now about how the emperor monitors everything here? She thought that they could all be calm about the fate of their country. It was the Duchess of Highley. The Highley family was from a great family whose daughters became queens for several generations during the Fernand dynasty. And there were rumors that they were the first to support Kvanok. Yusfir was sure that all the ladies gathered here were experienced politicians who survived a wave of riots, but did not lose their influence. The girl believed that what kind of empress they would see her as could have an impact on her political activities. Yusfir admitted to herself that something was bothering her. Marianne had previously told her that the girl with the long green hair was Austin's sister, the wife of the Marquis of Brooks. Her name was Marquise Rivera Brooks. And it was not surprising to our heroine that it seemed to her as if she saw herself from the past. The Empress asked her if she was the wife of the Marquis of Brooks. Yusfir said that she knew that her guest had a love for tea, and she asked if she liked their tea. Ravenna raised her slanted eyes to the Empress in surprise. It was as if she had woken up from a dream, and a little confused she answered yes. She assured that it was the first time she had seen such tea leaves, and she honestly admitted that her family also grows tea. The lady sitting next to me couldn't help but exclaim, and she reminded her that she had spoken with the Empress herself. Duchess Haley asked Her Majesty for forgiveness for the girl, slowly sipping her tea. She assured that she was so taciturn that sometimes she showed her clumsy side. Marquise Brooks became sad and blushed all over, looking down again. The ladies began to talk to each other, discussing Ravenna's recent phrase about growing tea. After all, everyone knew that on the Brooks family property it was so cold that only frost-resistant trees could grow there. The ladies also noticed that the Empress herself is from the northern region. Duchess Haley said, shaking her head, that it was cold in the northern part of the empire, and that the crops there hardly grew properly, and it was hard for many people, like the Brooks family. The lady asked the Empress to tell her about her homeland, and how much was it different from the north of their country. Yusfir felt like she was taking an exam. The smoke coming out was deliberately tormenting Rinvera. After all, she was a lady who had not yet strengthened her family position, especially in front of the Empress, checking whose side she would be on. But perhaps among them there was someone who collaborated with her brother Dequid, and our heroine was well aware of what she had to do to implement her future plans. But I didn't know if it would be right. She doubted whether her thoughts were correct. Yusfir thought, what if she could use magic? But there was no use thinking about it now. Then near the fountain, when her husband tenderly kissed her hand, the girl decided that she needed to try. Yusfir replied that, as was said, in the north there were cold and harsh weather conditions all year round. The ladies were surprised by what they heard. The Empress continued, "What if you thought about it? People live in the north and south, and I asked if there was a difference." Yusfir said, addressing Duchess Haley, that she was really glad that the secular ladies of the empire were sincerely interested in the north and knew how everything really was there. And what if they spent so much time on how things were going for other families? Then she believed that they managed their lands properly. Rinvera was surprised and looked up again. Duchess Haley was also a little surprised, and he hesitated. She asked what the Empress was talking about and what exactly she meant. When asked by Duchess Haley, Yusfir explained that this is exactly what she meant. The Empress said that she knew about particularly harsh winters until recently, and that she was simply interested in how they were doing. One of the girls said that, unlike in the north of the empire, the weather this season was favorable because they were blessed by the goddess herself. Yusfir insisted that she knew how there was little rain last fall, and that there was a food shortage throughout the entire empire because of this. Yusfir knew from the records that the palace sends grain to people in especially difficult times. The Duchess lowered her eyes and remained silent. The Empress believed that regardless of the goddess's blessing, winters were still difficult times for the people. But she believed that severe hunger and cold came neither from the south nor from the north. The girl nobly noted that everyone should look after even the darkest and most remote lands. After all, the people of their empire lived there. Yusfir asked the ladies who were visiting her how last winter went in their lands. The ladies silently looked at each other, not deciding who would speak first. The Empress was surprised why her question seemed rather difficult. After all, the girl wanted to clarify how they coped with hardships. She saw the hesitation in the Marquise's eyes and gave her the right to say a word. The girl admitted that during the winter season their lands literally become useless. Therefore, every time they try to put aside the grain that the emperor sends, so as not to starve during the winter frosts, and the preparation of firewood for the winter for the imperial palace was always entrusted to farmers. After all, they could not work in winter, and for this they were paid daily, and with this money they can buy food for themselves separately. Yusfir asked Rinvera if she believed that everything was being done for the people. The Empress continued her questions. After all, Brooks's estate was in the north, but if she had to choose, she would come to them for a while. Duchess Hailey rather disliked Her Majesty's point of view. She asked what the Empress wanted to hear from them now. The rest of the ladies sat a little sad. Yusfir calmly replied that she just asked how last winter went and nothing more. She insisted that she had checked the Empire's annual budget before attending this meeting, and she said that she knew how records about that appeared last winter, that the families of Duchess Hailey and Duchess Goto acquired large quantities of iron ore from other countries and took it to their estates. Yusfir said that the family of Marquise Brooks purchased only clothes, and she persistently asked the other ladies what they did with the iron ore and for what purposes they could use it on their territory. Duchess Hailey was furious and asked the Empress if she thought they were planning a rebellion. Duchess Goto could not stand it and said that it was a misunderstanding. The Duchess tried to interrupt her, but Goto continued that they had simply heard that the ownership of the Misril mine, owned by the imperial family, would be sold at auction, and iron ore was needed only for the development of the mine. But as far as Yusfir knew, the aristocrats agreed to approve the reform only on the condition that Kavana would transfer ownership of the mine to the aristocracy. And that is the only reason why the conservative aristocracy behaved so quietly and calmly. Duchess Hailey was outraged by Yusfir's words, and she assured her that they had been investing enough in this empire since its very foundation. The lady said that she devoted her whole life to the country, and she assured that she could not hide her anxiety and concern, because in response she received only disdain. She asked permission to take her leave for the day from Her Majesty. At the same time, demonstratively, a whole week has passed since then. The sunset painted the clouds above the imperial palace scarlet. Our heroine sat back in the office chair. She was upset that none of those ladies had ever written to her, and she assumed that was why she felt so bad. Yusfir had already begun to reproach herself that maybe she should have pleased them then. They knocked on her door, apologizing for the disturbance and asking her permission to enter. It was Baron Baynard. The Empress asked him worriedly what had happened. The guy insisted that he had to give her something. Austin handed Her Highness an envelope and a linen bag. He said that his sister asked him to convey this to the Empress. The guy said that he had heard how Yusfir showed concern for the Marquise Rinvera Brooks and defended her by standing up for her in front of all those aristocratic ladies at the tea party. He said that when his sister was 10 years old, she came down with a fever, and after that began to stutter. That because of this, she hid from the whole world for many years. And for the first time, she asked to deliver this letter to her brother first. Meanwhile, Yusfir was untying the bag, curious about what was in it. When the Empress removed the string, she saw that the bag was full of dried tea leaves that grew exclusively on the territory of the Brooks Marquisate. Austin insisted they were special. The plants are small on the outside but persistent, and when dried, the leaves had an incredible aroma. He said that these tea leaves were very valuable, that even to him, his brother Rinvera did not often send them, and he believed that his sister really wanted to repay her for her good attitude. The guy said that his sister was perhaps wiser than him and better understood who was really worth serving. For Yusfir, this was a revelation. Austin, meanwhile, bowed to Her Majesty. He told her that he was immensely grateful to her for the mercy she had shown him and his sister, and he promised never to forget it. Yusfir told Baron Baynard that she truly believed that he was capable of being responsible for their people, There was a short but significant handshake. Our heroine was now examining the dried tea leaves in the bag. She realized that Kavana said everything correctly, that even if she couldn't use her magic, she was still a simple person who had the power to help others. The girl held dried bright green tea leaves in her palm. The Empress stood up. She told Baron Baynard that the Marquise had indeed given her a very good gift. The next day, Yusfir ordered tea to be brewed from the leaves that were given to her. In the end, the tea party ended quite well, and she felt some relief. She was glad that thanks to this, she was able to become friends with Marchioness Brooks. She told her husband that Sir Austen had been so kind to her lately. The Emperor was surprised. After all, his wife used to call him Baron Baynard and could not understand what had happened since then. The girl admitted that he himself said that he was a servant of Her Majesty, and he suggested that in future we address him by his first name. He assured that he would consider it an honor. Yusfir admitted that she used to think that Sir Austen hated her, but now it just looked funny to her. The man noticed that his wife was quite pleased with this. She just laughed in response. She said that she was happy that she was becoming closer to his people, and she assured that there was nothing more beautiful for her. Kavana sadly said that he felt completely forgotten by his wife, but seeing the anxiety in the girl's eyes, he asked her to forget about it. He said that this moment could not be more beautiful. A silent question was depicted on Yusfir's face. Kwana asked his wife that is not today that young lady should arrive at the palace. The girl realized that it was time for her to run. The girl timidly got out of the carriage and looked at the surroundings with interest. She was a little shy. The Empress came out to meet a sick teenage girl. She greeted Edith kindly. The girl was clearly scared, but then she controlled her feelings and bowed and said that it was an honor for her to meet Her Majesty. Yusfir suggested that it was difficult for her to get here. Marianne looked happy. Edith, too, at the sight of her eldest and only but so beloved sister, also smiled in response. And unable to resist, the girl threw herself into her sister's arms. The maid said that she was very glad to see that her sister was feeling better, and everything was thanks to the medicine that, at the behest of Her Majesty, they were given. The Empress assured her that from now on she would receive full treatment, and she expressed the hope that Edith would soon recover. Yusfir extended her hand to the child. She said that she was pleased to meet her, and she offered to take care of each other. Edith looked at Her Majesty a little confused and with her mouth half open, and our heroine sympathized with the child who had already suffered so much. The girl timidly took the Empress's hand, shaking it. She had a timid look in her eyes, and in them one could read prayer, gratitude, fear, and also a mixture of childish anxieties and hopes. Inexplicable and hitherto unknown feelings washed over the child. She had never been so happy in her life, and the Empress herself experienced similar emotions along with the child. They were interrupted by a young red-haired boy running up the steps to meet them. Having caught his breath from the fast run, he began to ask for forgiveness, wondering how long they had been waiting for him. Yusfir smiled sweetly at Simon and assured him that they had arrived quite recently, and she noticed to herself that she suddenly felt dizzy. The Empress began to introduce Edith to the young doctor. She was a little timid, and the red-haired one, hesitating a little, said that he was very glad to meet you. After the first acquaintance ended, Simon asked to follow him, promising that he would now explain everything to them. And Yusfir thought that the doctor and Edith were the same age and could soon become close. The guy said that, in fact, only aristocrats and the imperial family used this hospital. Therefore, there were slightly fewer wards here than in other hospitals. Then he demonstrated a laboratory for the study of diseases and methods of getting rid of them. Edith could not contain her exclamation of delight. Simon said that they are currently studying solidiosis. He stood at the work desk and apologized that it was a little dirty, and the guy asked Her Majesty for forgiveness for this. Yusfir reassured him that there was nothing to worry about, and she assured that it was nice to see that the doctors were working hard. The Empress picked up the piece of paper held out by the young doctor. He said that this document contained all the information about solidiosis. Simon said that unfortunately they could not reduce the price of the medicine, because it was produced and sold only at the top of Gilly. But the components of that medicine are completely different from the usual ones. He assumed that this could be the influence of magic, and he regretted that he could not experiment, since he did not know it in essence. The guy regretfully admitted that he would probably have to look for another way. Here Yusfir intervened in his reasoning. She said she could help him if the problem was magic. The Empress took the guy by the hands, and she began to ask him if he wanted to work with her. He was a little confused, but when the meaning of the words dawned on him, he even dropped the paper from his hands to the floor. He was amazed by the Empress's desire to join them in researching a cure for solidiosis. Our heroine thought to herself that when she first arrived in the Empire, her magic weakened. But now first she needed to establish herself in her role. After all, she wanted to help the Empire with what she was strong at. She thought that her husband Kwana must have been happy, and she voiced her desire to him, assuring that this could be a great opportunity for her. But his expression did not bode well for her. Yusfir was surprised by her husband's reaction. He asked Yusfir to understand that what she was telling him now. The man grabbed his head and asked Yusfir what she was talking about now. That whatever the reason, he could not approve of this idea of hers. The girl couldn't understand why. She insisted that if she and Simon looked into this issue together, they would be able to learn more about solidiosis, and this could definitely benefit their empire. Kavana said that if his wife had heard about a cure for solidiosis, then she should have heard about the Gili Peak. He assured that there was no place on the entire continent that had the same power as that one. After all, a huge number of trade routes passed through it, and not a single merchant will dare to even think about opening his own business until he understands all the intricacies of the influence he is exerting. And medicine for scoliosis was the main product there. Kavana believed that if his wife suddenly decided to intervene, he warned that this would definitely be very dangerous for her. The Emperor rubbed his temple, driving away a sudden headache. Yusfir told her husband that they could not simply turn a blind eye to this issue. After all, so many people were simply dying on the streets. She insisted that she could no longer pretend that nothing was happening, suddenly remembering the maid's sister. The Emperor assured that the administration was well aware of the seriousness of the situation and was looking for a way out of it. He asked his wife not to worry about this issue. Yusfir was upset that the conversation was not going well. She recalled that her husband had recently suggested that she do something that could light a fire in her, and he would be very happy about it. The girl recalled that he told her that he considered her a worthy person, that she is capable of taking on an empire. Yusfir was sure that she was doing a good job. Kavana said that these were different things, that he wanted his wife to enjoy life in the palace and see only the good. He was sure that she did not need the hardships. I asked my wife to rest. The girl was surprised that her husband wanted her to just drink tea and chat in vain with the ladies of the court, pretending that she herself knew nothing. She threateningly declared that she was not a puppet, and he was not a puppeteer. For the first time, the Emperor saw his wife's outburst of rage. He was extremely surprised by this side of her character, but the girl, seeing the change in his face, somehow perceived it in her own way. She began to make excuses confusedly. Yusfir was now afraid that she had inadvertently angered her husband. She didn't know what she should do now. She began to blame herself, that it was all because she got involved in politics, screamed, proving her position. And then everyone completely forgot about Prudence. Yusfir was actually just used to the fact that Kvanak was always kind to her. The girl began to stutter and ask the Emperor for forgiveness. The man interrupted her halting speech. He assured his agitated wife that he did not want to scare her at all. Yusfir was still trying to say that it was her fault. The husband firmly but gently took her shoulders with his hands. He asked her for forgiveness. He assured that he knew how important it was for her. The girl just looked up at her husband. She was relieved to realize that his expression did not seem to show anger. It was more like he was afraid himself. She asked her husband what was bothering him so much. Kwana admitted that his greatest fear was that he would not be able to protect his wife. Kavana explained that this was why he was so afraid to even think about letting someone important to him out of his sight again, even for a moment. He admitted that this made him scared, but these thoughts never left his head. He knelt in front of his wife. Kavana begged and begged Yusfir to let him protect her. As he spoke, he pressed his forehead to her hand. The girl tried to comprehend his fears. It turned out that he had already lost someone very close to him. Yusfir gently touched her husband's cheek. She asked what happened in his past, and she assumed with horror that he had already gone through something similar. Kavana covered his forehead and part of his face with his hand, as if hiding from the painful memories that had washed over him. The girl called him by name, bringing him out of his stupor. He asked forgiveness for his weakness. But the emperor was never able to control his emotions, and so as not to frighten his wife with his condition, he hurried to leave the room. The girl called after him by name, but he didn't even look back. Morning has come. Our heroine was lying alone on the bed. She wondered where her husband had gone. After all, he never returned to her. She wondered who the man was who was so dear to her husband. Mariana came in and was surprised that the lady had already woken up so early. She was holding fresh flowers in her hands. The maid said that she was just about to change the flowers in the vase. Yusufir began to thank her. She admitted that she was a little depressed. The girl admitted that she had long wanted to ask, did Mariana herself pick flowers for the bouquet every day? The young woman, without looking up from her work, denied her participation in this. She claimed that all the bouquets decorating Her Majesty's room were made by the emperor himself personally and with his own hand. Marianne helped the empress get out of bed, holding her hand. She said that Kwana brought flowers every morning, that he wanted to show her their special beauty. The girl remembered how recently there were scarlet roses in a vase, and that she was interested in touching their petals with her finger. It turned out that all the flowers were also from Kvanak. A memory immediately surfaced of how they were in the greenhouse for the first time, and that she then admitted to him that she loves different flowers of all kinds of colors and sizes. Yusufir was holding a small flower in her hand. Tears welled up in her eyes, dripping onto his delicate little petal. She admitted that she knew better than anyone that Kwana was not a bad person. Yusufir walked among the flowering plants. I touched their greenery with my fingers and enjoyed their aroma. Then in the room, the maid assured the empress that the weather was so beautiful today, and she suggested that she take a walk in the garden before the sun set. And now Yusufir stopped and sat down next to a huge bush of small flowered rose. She blamed herself for even bothering Marianne. The girl said that this would not go on, and she came here to the garden to unwind and recharge with positivity. Then our heroine's attention was attracted by a strange sound that was heard under the very vault of the greenhouse. She touched the bush closest to her and asked it if anyone else was there. Soon Yusufir discovered a fairly young guy sleeping. He had a black patch over one of his eyes. His hair was long and tied back in a ponytail. The discovery in the bushes greatly surprised the empress. She asked herself the question of who it could be. The stranger hummed something sleepily. Yusufir continued to look at him with curiosity. He was in uniform and she assumed that he was a soldier, but she couldn't understand what he was doing in the greenhouse. The girl decided that it was worth calling someone here, but the guy had already woken up at that moment and stood next to her. Suddenly, the stranger began to scream and call for help. He cried out to someone to save him. Yusufir wondered why he suddenly started screaming. The guy was already laughing and said that he wanted to ask who the girl was, but he himself already guessed that she was the new ruler of the Empire of the Sun. The stranger scratched his head and asked the empress for forgiveness for his violent reaction. He assured her that he had come here to rest, and Yusufir wondered what order this man must have been from. The girl asked him where he was from and what his name was. The guy answered cryptically that he never belonged to any place. He informed Her Majesty, bowing slightly, that the name of the despicable youth who slept before her was Jaxor. Yusufir thoughtfully repeated the name. After a short time, it dawned on her, and her surprise knew no bounds. This was the same Jaxor she had heard so much about. The guy was pleasantly surprised that the empress herself knew him, but he couldn't understand where because he was seeing her for the first time. And the situation was like this. If Sir Aslan was the emperor's left hand, then Jaxor was called his right hand. The guy was his close friend and had also been a slave and a soldier before. Thanks to his outstanding fighting abilities, he became the commander of the Central Imperial Army, and Yusufir could not understand why he was here now. The girl was surprised that he considered himself not to belong anywhere. After all, she knew that he was at the head of an entire army. Jaxor was amazed that the empress knew everything about him so well. He said that Her Highness was right, but he was no longer either a commander or a soldier. Yusufir couldn't believe her ears. Jaxor cheerfully explained to her that he had recently retired. He believed that he had had enough of battles and wars, and now he was going to allow himself to enjoy his freedom without fear of his beauty rotting on the battlefield. The guy said that His Majesty had become more demanding, and I thought that at such a pace I might not have time to really live. Yusufir said that she did not know how the emperor behaved at work, but she assured that in ordinary life her husband was very nice. The interlocutor did not believe her words. Jaxar was lost in thought. The guy was convinced that the emperor he knew was a very strange person. He assured Her Majesty that she could tell him everything. The girl did not understand what exactly he wanted to hear from her. The guy said that he deeply respected his empress. But I wanted to ask her if her marriage to Kvanuk was a political move that was humiliating for Ahea. He believed that in addition His Majesty was not the friendliest person, but rather cruel. And so Jaxar thought it might be hard for her. Ousfir was surprised how he could say such things about the emperor. After all, he had been friends for a long time. The guy smiled slyly and said that it seemed to him that the empress considered Kvanuk a good person. He asked if anyone had threatened her. Ousfir had a look of complete bewilderment on her face. Jaxar insisted that he just decided to take an interest. Suddenly, someone said or did something and she had no one to share it with. The empress furiously accused him of having the impudence to say such things about her wife directly to her face. She told him not to even dare to suggest that someone could intimidate her or something else. The guy assured that he was not making assumptions, since he had known Kvanuk since childhood. Ousfir said that it means he was mistaken about the emperor all this time. The girl said that the emperor was an ideal husband in every way, that he was nice and attentive. She assured that she values and respects him very much. Jaxar said he was overjoyed to hear that she seemed happy with her marriage to Kwana. She couldn't understand why he was suddenly speaking into space. The guy asked if the emperor agreed with him, and he was just approaching them with clenched fists behind Ousfir so that she could not see him. His face was tense. Our heroine sharply turned her whole body backwards. Her husband Kwana stood in front of her. It turned out that he had heard everything from the very beginning. Ousfir asked him when he came here. The man rubbed the back of his head and looked away. He said he became worried about his wife when he heard Jaxar was in the garden. The guy was surprised that Kavana was afraid of his meeting with the empress, so he dropped all his business and rushed here. But Jaxar did not deign to answer His Majesty. He hurried away from the greenhouse, assuring them that he did not want to interfere with their conversation in private. Ousfir was angry with the guy. It turned out that he knew from the very beginning that Kavana was here. That's why he began to question her. The man cleared his throat and told his wife that he had something to tell her. Rubbing his neck, he asked Ousfir to give him a minute of her precious time. Noticing the anxiety in his beloved's eyes, the emperor asked if everything was fine with her and if she slept normally. The girl, with a slightly downcast look, answered that it wasn't very good. She was worried about her husband because he left yesterday but never returned. She said she was very worried about him. After all, something bad could happen to him. The girl admitted that last night it seemed to her that he had left her forever. Then she sat for a long time at the window and sadly thought about it. With noticeable excitement on his face, Kvanna explained to his wife that they understood why the girl was angry with him, and he admitted that it was entirely his fault. The man gently took his beloved's hand and pressed it to his face. He told her that he understood how he had frightened her by insisting that she give up her ideas. After just the incident, it seemed to the emperor that Ousfir would hate him, and that she wouldn't want to see him again. But he simply did not know what could be said in his own defense. He realized that he was almost choking with regret, and simply unable to bear it, he left and ran away in a cowardly manner. Tearing Kvanak away from his sad thoughts, the girl explained that she had no reason to hate or fear her husband. Then the emperor's words surprised the girl quite greatly. He honestly said that he wanted to protect her, and that was enough. The girl said with a smile that she believed his words. And wanting to change the topic, Ousfir thanked her husband for the flowers that appeared in her room every morning. The emperor admitted to her that he wanted to give his wife something better. Confused, the girl asked, assuring her husband that flowers would be more than enough for her. The guy took a pendant out of his pocket. He said, "Now is the right time." At Kavanak's request, the girl squeezed the pendant in her palm. Then the empress, with delight in her eyes and extreme surprise, realized that it was an artifact, and Kavana was pleased with the impression his gift made on his wife. The emperor asked Ousfir if she liked the gift, to which the girl replied that she really liked it. She added that she thought he was very handsome. She was sure that it would not be easy to get it, to which he replied that the most important thing was that the girl was happy. He admitted that he received it from the dwarves, who had trade relations with Radon. The emperor began to gently kiss the girl on the forehead, holding her shoulder with his hand. Kvanna felt goosebumps run through his beloved's body and asked if he should have moved away. He gently pressed his nose to hers and asked if he could continue. and he said that he would like to kiss her lips. Yusfir was greatly surprised that the emperor was asking her permission. She was a little confused by such suddenness. A little confused, the girl said that it seemed to her that she agreed. The guy gently pressed the girl to him by the waist, kissing her. She remembered that the emperor had told her before that she was his first. But his kiss was so beautiful that she couldn't even believe it. The girl even began to cry. Yusfir was literally choking with excitement, to which the emperor said that you need to breathe through your nose. Confused, the empress said that she did not know how to breathe, that she was a little out of her mind. Gently stroking his wife's cheek, Kavana suggested they practice this too. He reminded his wife that they slept holding hands, and he thought that you could also practice kissing much more often to get used to it. The husband asked whether the girl liked it this time, and she offered to kiss again. The girl asked to give her a little more time to catch her breath properly. Kavanak began to kiss his wife, and she asked for mercy and to give her the opportunity to at least breathe. He did not let her go, and Yusfir, closing her eyes, began to moan languidly and moan with pleasure. The couple lay on the bench, giving in to the feelings that washed over them. The girl was very surprised when the light went out, but in one place there were sparks. She was excited, and the beloved said that this was the effect of a magic scroll and would not last very long. The wife was greatly amazed that Kwana used the scroll just so she could see it. He assured that it was a small thing, that if the beloved at least smiled, then it was worth it. Taking a strand of the girl's blonde hair, the guy remembered what he promised himself if he married someone. He would make this woman the happiest in the world. He made this promise to himself when he was still a slave. The couple was sitting on a bench and the man was kissing a lock of his beloved's hair. Kwana said that at that time marriage seemed like an unattainable dream to him. As a boy, he sat on the bare floor and drew a family of people with a stick. Yusfir felt embarrassed that all this time she had been thinking about marriage as an alliance between two states, but Kwana just wanted to try to create a happy family with her. That explained why he cared about her all this time. The girl realized that all this time she had been deceiving such a wonderful person. She apologized and gently placed her hand on his cheek. The girl recalled that he forbade her to help Simon develop a cure. But the Empress knew firsthand how painful it was to watch helplessly when death took away loved ones. She insisted that this is why she wanted to help create a cure for celidiosis, so that the people of their empire would never face such a nightmare again. Kavana asked her if he could somehow dissuade his wife from changing her mind. He pressed her hand to his cheek. The emperor knew very well that his wife was one of those wonderful people who always do what they set their mind to. He asked her only one thing: to think about her safety first. Yusfir suggested distributing the medicine in secret, so that people would not know that it was the emperor's initiative. And their opinion about the emperor would not have changed then. She looked at him with pleading eyes, asking permission to help Simon. The man asked if she was sure that she could make the medicine together with the doctor. The empress was surprised that her husband gave her permission so quickly. Covering his face with his hands, the emperor asked why his wife thought she needed permission. Kwana promised to find a safer way for research. Yusfir asked with hope and delight whether they would sleep in the same room tonight as before. The man asked in surprise if she was really lonely. The empress explained that she had no acquaintances or close people in the empire, and that's the only reason she needs the emperor to stay by her side. The girl took his hand and pressed it to her cheek. In response to her words, the reigning husband promised to always be by her side, no matter what happens. The events of her past life flashed before our heroine's eyes. Envious brother, tears, an arrow to the very heart. But now he was in her life, her beloved. That then he carried away her body, devoid of life, in the forest. And now, hugging her, he promised to always be with her. Both the flowers and plants of the greenhouse were witnesses of this. Yusfir was surprised that one of the library rooms had underground passages. Kavana told the girl that there are several of them here, and in case of an emergency, there will be an opportunity to evacuate. After the emperor said that there were 16 secret passages in the palace, the wife was surprised. The girl had no idea what they looked like or how to get there. The guy said it was quite natural. He showed one of the keys to the secret passage. Yusfir asked if this thing was an ordinary figurine. Kavana said that the third figurine from the left was the one needed. You just had to click on it. There was a loud crash and the secret passage opened. Yusfir could not contain her surprised exclamation. The gloomy staircase seemed to go endlessly underground. The emperor invited his beloved to follow him. He gently held the girl's hand and asked her not to rush. They followed further and further along the stairs, illuminated only by the dim, flickering lights of candles. The emperor invited her wife to start working here. The empress's eyes lit up when she saw many flasks, test tubes, and many other equipment. She expressed delight at being allowed to do research here. Yusfir was surprised and delighted. After all, she couldn't even think that there was something like that in the palace. With a smile, the man said that real magic was about to happen. When will they be able to create their own cure for solidiosis? The girl said it would be worth calling Simon. Soon the doctor, with many books in his hands, hurried to greet Her Majesty. Yusfir greeted Simon and Mr. Oslin. Oslin said that it was he who designed these underground passages when the emperor asked him to build a safe place. Baron Baynard said that he would not mind providing a few extra hands in his person. After all, when he got acquainted with the data and the essence of the work, he realized that this project was quite unusual. Simon said that the Baron systematized all the information about the patients. Austin said he only found information about patients who were in the temple's records. Yusfir suggested that in order to recognize the disease, find out the causes and general symptoms, then divide the percentage by gender and age. The Empress was sure that Sir Oslin had come a long way, and that time should not be wasted. The Emperor looked at his wife's determination and realized that he had chosen the perfect wife who cared about her subjects. Yusfir suggested that we start quickly, just as Simon had said. The doctor said that the Empress should not delve into documents. Oslin asked Her Majesty if she had ever done anything like this, but Kvanna said that he would prefer that the guys do it. A week later, Her Majesty, the Count, and the doctor spent another night searching for at least something. Simon could not find anything useful because the disease appeared suddenly, and there were no special distinctive symptoms. Even the incubation period was individual for everyone. A drop of cold sweat ran down the doctor's face. They spent so much time but did not identify the cause of the disease. Everyone was already tired. After all, in all these days it was not possible to move forward in their research. Due to her carelessness, the girl spilled ink on one of the medical records and stained her hands. Mariana approached her, asking if everything was okay with the girl and offering her help to clean up. The maid saw the mistress's pallor. She was unhappy that Her Majesty had hardly been resting lately, and to which the girl replied in a tired voice that she considered it her duty. Marianne invited the tired Empress to bring at least a cup of tea, and warned that it would take time to replace the inkwell. The girl realized how much she missed this tea. Yusfir mentally thanked the maid and the Marquise. She said that the smell even cleared her head a little after long hours of work. Marianne wanted to tell Her Majesty that she should not burden herself so much, and that she should at least rest a little. She assured the lady that solidiosis had been raging within the empire for several years. After all, the former ruler of these lands neglected this disease. Therefore, there was not even an attempt to understand the causes of the disease, and that many tried to cope with the disease alone. The maid knelt down and supported the Empress, telling her that she helps many people, including herself. Yusfir said that she was even afraid to imagine what it would be like in the palace without Mariana, and she assured that she regretted that she did not have the opportunity to take care of her mistress even better. The maid said that she would like to make the girl tea using water from the Fakar River, which was a blessing. The Farar was a huge river that flowed through the entire empire. The further upstream, the cleaner the water was, which made the aroma of the Empress's favorite tea even more beautiful. Yusfir was a little distracted by the conversations of her maid, wondering how she knew about this river. It turned out that Mariana spent her childhood at the source of the river. The water there was so clean that it could be drunk immediately without boiling. Yusfir said that there was nothing like this in Achaea. She asked the woman how long she had lived there. The maid was forced to leave for the capital after 14 summers. After all, someone in the family had to earn at least enough food and treatment for their younger sister Edith. Yusfir was surprised that they did not move to the capital together, and Marianne was able to take her sister only when she was already terminally ill. The girl had a rather interesting idea. Mariana and Edith were from the same family, but only Edith suffered from scoliosis. The Empress realized with horror that the river, which was considered a blessing and flowed through the entire country, could be contaminated. Having studied where the incidence was highest, the girl suggested studying the Fakar River. She quickly drew conclusions. The disease solidiosis swept across the entire empire, but there were still places where the incidence rate remained much lower than in others. The girl pointed her hand at the document, showing the area where there was a serious jump in the incidence rate due to the development of the mining industry. There was also a sacred river flowing through this area. Everyone who was sick with this terrible disease was just emigrants who moved in search of work. It was quite possible that silidiosis was a waterborne disease. Our heroine and her husband went to explore the waters of the Fakar River. Some guy met them and offered a rose for the newlyweds. He assured that she was blessed by the goddess herself, because she grew up near the Fakar River and fed on its waters. The couple was surprised when the guy called them newlyweds. He awkwardly apologized, suggesting that they were not newlyweds. Yusfir said that he was right and accepted the red rose from his hands. Yusfir was very nervous because this was her first experience of working undercover. She noticed that they were doing a good job, because the emperor was never recognized. When the man covered his eyes with his hat, his wife asked if he was comfortable. The emperor felt a little awkward, because for the first time he disguised himself in the middle of the day, and not, as always, secretly at night. The girl was surprised that they would walk at night. The man assured her that he would not take his beloved anywhere at night. He assured that even if everything seemed so peaceful, he did not know where any danger could arise. He noticed that if it weren't for this damned scoliosis, they probably wouldn't be here now. Yusfir did not expect her husband to be so worried. She was sure that he was ready to respond to any of her requests. The girl looked at Kvanak with pleading eyes, persuading him to go to the Fakar River. The emperor knew that his wife now understood what was happening better than anyone. Therefore, he has no doubt that he should follow the girl's opinion. Even Oslin and Simon thought that Her Majesty's insight was worth trusting. Flushing a little, the Empress admitted that he flattered her a little. The man assured the girl that she was created to take care of government affairs. He said with a smile that no matter how the girl disguises herself, her innate nobility cannot be hidden. Yusfir began to be modest, assuring that she was completely ordinary. And I couldn't understand why my husband suddenly decided this. Kwana insisted that even now his wife was so beautiful. He captured her lips with a passionate kiss. The girl began to struggle and resist his caresses. She convinced Kavanak that now was not the place or time for tenderness and kisses in public. The man said that he wanted to go closer to the water. His wife suggested that she could check if there was anything strange around. He asked his wife if something happened to call the man in the blue jacket. Looking back, she saw a satisfied Sir Jackson. The emperor held his hat on his head. He said that a retired military man is sometimes assigned different tasks. Kavana promised his wife that he would return soon. She waved her hand at him, and smiling, she said that she would wait for his return. When the man left, Yusfir looked after him. She was glad that her husband allowed her to go undercover even despite his concerns. The girl was sitting on the grass of the lawn. She understood that if Kavana had not agreed, then dealing with this whole matter would have been much more difficult. Now they put forward the assumption that the cause of the disease was the water of the Fakar River. But Yusfir was not sure about that. After all, many people drank water from the river and used it for various needs. However, not everyone got sick. The girl thought that the plants could give her at least some clue. She touched the petal of a yellow flower with her finger. "Help, scary, in the river water," said the plant. Yusfir asked the flower what happened and what he was afraid of. The plant asked permission to share its memories of what happened. It begged and begged to save them. Our heroine showed that flower. As a man in dark clothes and a hood held his hand over the water of the river, she asked herself who he was and what he did. From his hand, cherry shadows of smoke fell onto the water. Yusfir found the feeling that suddenly arose in her chest strange. She immediately felt somehow unwell. She felt as if she had experienced this before. Then she realized when it was. It was the same magic that killed her in her previous life. The girl could not understand why she felt the magic of that man in the Fakar River. She clenched her fists from the pain in her chest. It turned out that the man was a magician who worked for her brother. Yusfir suggested that he cast a spell on the Fakar River, spreading the disease throughout the empire. She was shocked that it could have been Daquita's evil plan. The girl jumped up from the ground and the hat flew off her head. Now she realized that the empire was in danger. Having calmed down a little, she looked at the water. Children were playing happily on the lawn nearby. Married couples were chatting nicely and enjoying each other's company. Yusfir was thinking to herself, what if her brother really ordered to pollute the water of the Fakar River? Then what was he trying to achieve with this? It turned out that he had a magician under his command. who had the power to do such a thing to a huge river. And if the goal was war, then they could take an easier path. The Empress was biting her nail, trying to unravel the tangle of events. She knew that the solidiosis was progressing slowly, and if you took the right medicine on time, you could survive for several years. And if only the expensive drugs supplied by the Gilly Top were more affordable, things would be easier. Then she remembered the words of the man who persuaded Marianne to cooperate. He said he had a powerful ally, and he promised the maid to pay a lot of money for her help.
Girl talking to her brother. He was confident that in order to destroy the empire, there was no need to create discord between the emperor and the conservatives.
Yusfir clutched the hem of her dress. She thought that her brother was trying to make money on medicines in this way, and with the help of those means to shake the empire from the inside. Oh, he was somehow connected with the top of Gilly. The girl decided that she must tell everything as soon as possible. Her husband approached her. He carried her hat in his hands. Seeing her confusion, he asked what happened in his absence. The girl rushed towards her husband. "Trouble, River Fakar, Empire!" she shouted incoherently to Kavana, tugging at his jacket sleeve. The man could not understand what happened to her in such a short time. Yusfir looked at the emperor. She thought that even if she told him everything, he might not believe her and consider it completely absurd. After all, she learned all this with the help of her ability. And although she now knew the truth, the emperor might be disappointed in her after learning about her magical powers. The man pressed his wife's head to his chest, gently and quietly told her that everything was okay. After a few minutes of tight hugs, Kvanna forcefully tore his wife away from him. He looked into her eyes and said that it seemed like she had something to tell him. And he said that, for now, he doesn't know what it is. The man brought his face closer to his wife's. He said she needed to hear something. He said he believed her, whatever it was. He asked if she had any guesses, and he assured that he would always believe her and her words. Kvanna stroked his wife's cheek, and tears appeared in her eyes. Yusfir, unable to restrain her emotions, began to roar uncontrollably. The man held her close to him, calming her down. He said that he could not even think that she possessed such magic. The girl said that she understood his dissatisfaction with the fact that she could eavesdrop on others. The man said that she was wrong. He assured that if not for her gift, the empire would have fallen without knowing the true cause of solidiosis. And it turned out that she saved everyone. Kavana did not understand why he should feel dissatisfied. The girl expressed gratitude that he took her word for it. She was also grateful that he didn't call her ability useless. She assured her husband that she would definitely find a way to cope with solidiosis. Yusfir confidently said that she already had an idea. She suggested researching available medications. Simon and Oslin, after listening to their empress, scratched their heads and beards in thought, and she proposed to study in detail how the condition of patients changes after taking the medicine. She thought that now that they knew the cause of the disease, it was pointless to look for a common factor. After all, the medicine that the top of Gilly was selling probably contained an ingredient that would help them get rid of this magic. Simon said that if he thought about it, there was something he thought was worth noticing. He noticed that without exception, every patient who got better developed vitiligo. The doctor began to quickly rummage through the pile of papers. Soon he found the right one. He pointed his finger at it and said that the chest and stomach of the patients began to turn white. It was the same with Edith. That people were very sick, but suddenly there was an improvement. On the sheet of paper there was a graphic picture of a person, and next to it was a transcript. Oslin said they were definitely taking medication, and the incurable disease could not recede on its own. He was surprised that there could be something in the composition that causes vitiligo. Simon said that the problem, however, was that the magic had a strong effect on the ingredients, and so it won't be easy to determine. Yusfir suddenly remembered that she had read somewhere that vitiligo was a chronic disease of elves. Simon was surprised that he didn't know that. The girl was rummaging through the papers on the table. The girl handed the young doctor a thick book, and she said that the information was in it, assuming that most of the changes in skin color were probably due to the roots of local herbs. She was sure that the reason the elves were prone to vitiligo was because of a special herb that grew only in their lands. And if there was a cure for this effect, then this could be a clue. She opened a page with a description of what she had just tried to briefly talk about. An old raven sat on a branch and cawed hoarsely. The hooded figure was surprised that His Highness was already here. David said that he was the only person who allowed himself to make him wait. Roman bowed a little and asked for forgiveness, making excuses that preparation took up all his time. The prince asked him how the experiment was going. The guy with glowing eyes assured his interlocutor that he would soon see the desired result. David was pleased with this message. He asked if he had run out of money, and he replied that the import of medicines brought a stable income and trade was in the black. The prince was sure that it would be easier if his sister Yusufir did at least something for them, but there was no information from her, not even small things. In this case, Roman proposed to do as they had previously discussed with him, and he reminded him that he had already given him the go-ahead. And if a girl stood in their way, he promised to take good care of her. Jakvid asked if his sister had done something suspicious, and he said that a message had been received that the emperor and his wife came incognito to the Fakar River. He supposed it might have been a simple walk, but I thought that they could use some caution. The prince was alarmed that if they really noticed something there, then this was the end. But Roman convinced him that he had nothing to worry about. A bright pink glowing ball formed above the magician's hand. He assured that the princess would never catch him. The guy was happy and self-confident. He convinced her that she wouldn't even understand that he was like that. Simon blamed himself for not having thought to look into the ingredients earlier, and he assured that he definitely did not understand medicinal herbs as well as Her Majesty. The young doctor took the girl by the hand. He looked into her eyes with delight, and he said that she was truly an incredible empress. The guy asked her to teach him this too. He could not think that with the help of Her Majesty they would be able to make a breakthrough in the field of medicine. Aslan asked him to calm down. The girl said that they mainly relied on the theories and systems of the West. The emperor watched his wife from the side and noticed that she was simply glowing all over. Kwana made his presence known. I asked my comrades if they had found an interesting clue. Yusufir handed her husband an open book. She reported that she discovered one medicinal herb in the medicine, but she grew up in the lands of the Dark Elves, and she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to get it. The man said there was no need to worry about this. The girl was surprised, and Aslan spoke about the rightness of the emperor. The guy said that His Majesty had been trying for a long time to find a way by which they could prevent the top of Gili from monopolizing trade relations between nations. And thanks to this, they recently made a secret deal with the dwarves, and for many years they maintained warm relations with the Dark Elves. So there was a way to resolve the issue through partners. The girl could not believe that they would actually be able to see them, but her boyfriends dissuaded her of this. The bearded man asked the man not to talk nonsense. According to him, it was impossible for a stranger to meet the Dark Elves. The events took place in one of the taverns. Aslan was sitting at the bar talking to some man in a robe. He admitted that the help was very helpful, and he thanked his interlocutor for opening new trade routes besides the Gili Peak. The red-bearded man explained that communicating with Dark Elves is very difficult. Aslan asked if their friendship with the Dark Elves had come to an end. The short man replied that it was not a matter of ending the friendship. Elves just hated people very much, that even if he guarantees the elves will never agree. The man, nervously tapping his finger on the table, said that he didn't really want to bring up this topic. But recently, elves have begun to be attacked more and more often. Most of the victims now lived near people's territories, and he, given the current situation, would not want to hurt old friends by meeting a suspicious person. The man noticed that the interlocutor's name was most likely fictitious. Red gave the seeds of the grass that the guy asked him for and wished him good luck, calling him a little man. Yusufir was disappointed that they could only get seeds, and she believed that it was unlikely that they would be able to do at least something without the help of the elves. Kavana was very disappointed and asked his beloved for forgiveness, to which the girl replied that it was not his fault and that she should not reproach herself for it. The girl wanted to convince herself not to despair. After all, she already had the seeds, and she simply had to find a way to create a medicine and do everything in her power. The emperor called his wife by name. He wanted to find out if she would spend the day here today. The girl talked about her successes, that she found several records that contain information about how the Dark Elves grow herbs using magic. She hoped that her magic, since it is connected to plants, could work. Although she and the elves had different magic, the Empress was in no hurry to despair. The blonde was very disappointed because her magic was not even enough for the seed to even hatch, and the Dark Elf herbs were the only clue, as expected. The husband asked the girl a question how long she had been here. After all, she was already all cold. Gently pressing himself against the girl, The lover reminded her that Marianne was already waiting for her. The emperor carefully noted that recently the girl had not cared at all about her diet and sleep patterns. And during all this time, I lost quite a lot of weight. When Yusufir asked whether only Mariana was concerned about her health, the emperor replied that everyone in the palace was already worried about her. Everyone hoped that they could at least slightly ease the burden that was holding her heart, and they hoped that she could give them at least a tiny clue in understanding how exactly she wanted to help the empire. But among all of them, Kwana wanted to know this the most, and then he will again be able to give her flowers every morning. The emperor asked to fulfill his request only for today and not leave him alone. The girl realized that behind all this fuss she had forgotten who made it all possible, and who was the first to believe in her, and helped her all the time, who made her fall in love with this empire. The girl embarrassed the emperor by asking if she could kiss him. The emperor was very surprised that the girl took the first step. Seeing the emperor's embarrassment, the girl apologized for suggesting it too suddenly. The lover said that they had been too busy lately, although they promised to practice to get used to it. The man reached out to his beloved to kiss her, but the girl stopped him, saying that she would like to kiss him first. Her gentle kiss was magical. The emperor bent his wife over and passionately began to kiss her back. The girl moaned. She asked him in his ear through sighs to be calm. Kwana begged her for a little more, putting his arm around her waist and holding her close. He asked his wife to kiss him again. The girl asked Kvanak to let her go, but he himself, sitting on the steps, continued to hold her in his arms. He said that he did not want to let go, because it was unknown when such a chance would arise again. The man said that he understood the fact that his wife had a lot to do. He promised not to keep her long. He pressed his head against her shoulder, and he asked just to let him enjoy it a little. Yusufir asked him for forgiveness. She was Akia's only hope, and her guardian deity expected the girl to bring the country back to life. And if the girl copes with this task, she said that she must do everything for this. Yusufir explained to her husband that this is why she believed that taking responsibility for everything around her was right and natural. The man tried to object. She gently caressed his cheek, and he, her husband, convinced her that those around her were always ready to lend her a helping hand. She thanked them for believing in her. Therefore, the girl also wanted to believe the emperor, and together with him solve this problem. She held his cheeks and looked into his eyes. Yusufir said she felt something in his pocket. The man said that he would get it himself, and he asked her not to move. Soon Kwana held a tightly closed bottle of liquid in his hand. He said that this morning he collected water from the Fakar River, and I thought it could be useful for their research. The man pressed the container to his forehead. He said upsetly that it was just water, and he said that he hated himself at such moments. Yusufir asked him to clarify. The emperor regretted that he was not a wizard. After all, it could become more useful to everyone. He said angrily that he would rather be an archmage than an emperor. The blonde began to giggle. She said that if anyone heard him, they might think that he became emperor because of her. Yusufir asked her husband to refrain from such jokes in the presence of Sir Aslan. She didn't want him to hate her, but he said it wasn't a joke. Kavana raised his eyes to the sky. He said that since ancient times he wanted to be a magician, and I wanted to be the strongest who could change the whole world. Yusufir was sure that it was all the more good that her husband chose to be emperor. She suggested comparing this bottle of water to a heart. The girl said that the water in this vessel is magic that can be stored in a person's heart. She assured that all living beings have a certain amount of magic that their body can handle. The strength of some could only be commensurate with the liquid in this vessel, but others could have more of it than the water in the Fakar River. And such people were called wizards. Yusufir said that among people it was quite difficult to find someone who could use their magic. After all, even if they had one, it didn't mean that he knew how to handle it. The girl told her husband that if he wanted to become a wizard, then he should have been born an elf. After all, they were well versed in magic. Kwana said she ruined her dream. The wife said that she did not want to offend him at all. The emperor wondered if the wife of another wizard had ever met. She answered that no, it had not happened, but she would really like it. It doesn't matter where. If they are nearby, she will immediately know. The girl assured that wizards can feel the power of others. Then she suddenly remembered her first contact with Edith. At that time, her strength was still too weak for Yusufir to immediately understand it. But it was true, the power of the sorceress. It turned out that Edith had magical powers. If you think about it, the patients who suffered from salidiosis were people. Husfir could not understand why the key to curing the disease was associated with the elves. Representatives of the elven people were so closely associated with magic that they could use it immediately after birth. Considering the fact that after taking the medicine, patients developed vitiligo, a disease of the elves, the girl assumed that that man had been hunting for people capable of magic from the very beginning. The guy asked forgiveness from the Supreme and asked permission to enter. The red-haired man was sitting in the office and turned to the newcomer with a smile. It was the owner of the Gilly Peak himself, Roman. The assistant said that everything was fine, that he also sent out invitations as he ordered. The man handed the guy a black envelope in his hand. He said that he should find time to send him too. The assistant rolled his eyes, but the gentleman assured that these were very important people, and he would like to invite them personally. The envelope was sealed with a personal stamp. The guy clarified that he should have been taken to the Imperial Palace, but on the table lay a thick book and an artifact for long-distance communication. The maid was hanging laundry on the lines to dry. The man quickly approached her from behind. He asked Marianne how she was doing. He asked how Her Majesty felt. The maid said that everything was as usual, that her mistress works and sometimes goes to the library. The man asked how her relationship with the aristocrats was. The woman insisted that she had not invited anyone since the tea party. The Baron called Marianne a useless old woman. She regretted that she could not tell him anything useful, but he assured that there was nothing wrong, and he himself took out what he had brought from his inner pocket. He insisted that this time he did not come because he wanted to hear about the Empress. He held out the envelope. He said that this was an invitation to a banquet that would soon take place at the top of Gilly. The Baron said that before the mass distribution of medicine for scolidosis begins, a meeting will be organized where all the aristocrats of the Empire will gather, and he wanted Her Majesty to become interested in this banquet with her help. Marianne was holding an envelope made of black paper in her hands. The man said that it was not difficult at all. The Empress should have been told that this was a good opportunity to make new acquaintances, and as if by accident, dropped the invitation on the floor of her bedroom. Marianne, narrowing her eyes, asked the Baron what was the will of those who stood behind him, but he avoided answering, saying that it was not important. Whichever it is. And he believed that the banquet would not leave Her Highness indifferent, he guaranteed it. Having told Marianne that he was expecting good news from her, the Baron was already in a hurry to leave. Simon asked Her Majesty why she came to the hospital so suddenly, and what happened. Husfir held the hand of a girl suffering from scolidosis. Simon asked the Empress what she was checking. Husfir realized that she was right, as expected. The local percentage who suffered from scolidia had magic. She told the doctor that she had finally solved the mystery of scolidosis. Each patient in the hospital had weakened magical abilities. This was not a coincidence at all. The horror on his face and his shaking hands betrayed Kavanaugh's excitement. The girl made a definitive statement that scolidosis applies only to those who possess magic. Kwana asked his wife if she was okay. Husfir explained that everything was fine with her now, assuring that if she had been infected, the symptoms would have appeared long ago. Yesterday, the Empress experimented with water from the Fakar River that Kwana brought her. To ensure minimal consequences, the girl suppressed her magical power to a minimum. For some time, the girl was seized with paralysis. Husfir realized that for those who have more than a certain amount of magic, this water will not cause any harm. This disease was aimed only at innocent people, who lived without even suspecting that they possessed magic. Oslin asked Her Majesty if she really thought that scolidia was created artificially. After some pause to think, the girl answered in the affirmative. She assumed that the Fakar River must have been poisoned using magic, and she hadn't checked it yet. She didn't want to blindly throw around theories.
Oslin asked what kind of magic it is, how it works, and what it is. Husfir said that unfortunately she doesn't know anything else.
The Empress assured that magic for her was raw and like a book, and to understand its essence, one ending will not be enough. She needed to familiarize herself with what it was like before the disease became so widespread. For starters, if they wanted to get rid of the magic that had afflicted the Fahara River, they had to find out who created it and what their purpose was. It was necessary to find the magician who was personally to blame for what happened, but finding and dealing with it will be especially difficult. Kwana asked if the girl meant that Gilly's summit, which supplied the medicine, had something to do with it. Simon was horrified that someone could start an epidemic for personal gain. Husfir said that it was too early to lose heart. The Empress reported that Marianne had received an invitation from an informant from the top of Galley. They wanted to spread the cure for solidiosis throughout the empire. A banquet was held to honor this event. Kavana was horrified that his wife was about to go into the enemy's lair, even if it helps them find a way to treat solidiosis. The emperor asked the girl not to risk herself. Yusfir knew that this was suspicious and dangerous, but she couldn't afford to miss this chance. And if there was even the slightest opportunity to meet the magician who created solidiosis, or find evidence that the owner of Gilly Peak and that magician are somehow connected, the girl took her husband's hand and invited him to go there together and find out everything. She said that she would need his help. The emperor was not enthusiastic about this idea, but he knew that he could not betray her trust. His Majesty ordered Aslan to send a letter that they would be happy to attend a banquet that would be held at the top of Gilly. The clearing in the forest was quite crowded today. The lady said that she thought it would be an ordinary banquet. There was even a hunting area here. Another insisted that she was already looking forward to the start. Yusfir quietly told her husband that she had heard that the Peak of Gili had special historical significance for the empire, but she could not even think that they owned the whole forest. Kavana was worried that the forest was full of insects, and he was also worried about the possibility of stumbling upon a wild animal. Her wife assured her comfortingly that she was not so weak. She couldn't control herself and didn't know what to do. After all, every time she saw Kwana, she kept thinking about what happened earlier. Mariana asked her if she knew that the emperor comes to the kitchen every day. Yusfir wondered why he did this. The maid assured that she herself only heard about it yesterday. The woman said that the emperor did this in order to check the food being delivered to the palace, that the chefs were very concerned about it, and even insisted on trying it themselves. The girl wondered why she had to go so far. But Marianne was sure that these actions of the emperor were justified by his desire to protect Her Majesty. After all, the news that they were planning to attend the banquet greatly excited both herself and the others. The maid assured that now that she realized how much His Majesty thought about his wife, she was sure that as long as he was with her, no one would harm her. Marianne was tying the lady's headdress. She insisted that now she was no longer worried about her, and she asked to give the Radon Empire a bright future. The emperor asked his wife what she was thinking about. She looked sad and worried. The girl hesitated. She was interested in what her husband thought about her, but she couldn't answer herself what she thought about him. Kvanak said that if his wife wants to return, he is ready to leave here immediately under any pretext. But the girl assured him that everything was fine. She expressed gratitude to him for helping her so much, looking lovingly into his eyes. Their palms touched and their fingers intertwined. Our heroine admitted to herself that she was no longer worried or afraid to be with this person. The horn was blown to prepare for the hunt. A man appeared on the wooden platform. He asked the guests for forgiveness for being late. He asked permission to introduce himself. It was the owner of the top of Gilly, Roman. The guests oohed, awed, admired, or simply applauded. The red-haired man smiled contentedly, closing his eyes and bowing slightly to the guests. Yusfir realized that he was the supreme one. The man assured the guests that they did not need to worry about their safety. He said that his people carefully control the number of animals in the local forest. He invited me to enjoy the hunt. Kvanak quietly told his wife to give him the inside of the forest and suggested that his wife take care of the outside. The girl promised to be careful. The man assured her that he would do everything possible to get the necessary information and tell her the good news. Her palm lay on top of his as a sign to be calm for her. Yusfir smiled radiantly and wished her husband a successful hunt. Soon he rode away on horseback after the hunters deep into the forest. Kavana held a white handkerchief in his hand. He brought it to his lips and kissed it tenderly. It was the thing of the wife who was nearby. He promised to become her knight. Roman, continuing to remain in the center of everyone's attention, addressed the guests. He asked if everyone was ready. He encouraged everyone to go ahead and enjoy the hunt. The ladies remained in the clearing, and the men, riding noble horses, rushed off into the forest, and only the sounds of the gong were heard in the distance. The girl told her comrades that they had already moved quite far, so everything should be fine, and she really hoped that they would be able to find at least some clue in this forest. Our heroine stood next to the tree, hugging its trunk with her arms and pressing her forehead. She asked if they could hear her. She assured him that she really needed help, asking permission to talk to them. Elle began to say, "Mag?" "She's a magician! Magician! Get away from here!" The Empress could not understand what was the matter. She asked the plant to calm down, assuring that she would not harm it. She said that she would like to ask them about the owner of this forest. "Traitor, destroyer, murderer, devil sinner, he's going to hell!" The tree shouted indignantly. Yusfir asked to clarify what was being discussed. The girl entered the memories of that tree. She saw the cart but could not yet see what was in it. There were branches and snags sticking out over the side from above. Near a pair of harnessed horses stood a man in a long cloak with a hood. There was a barely noticeable magical glow around his head. Then Yusfir saw with horror a hand that was hanging over the side of the cart, falling out from under the branches piled on top. The man said that the condition was not the best. He was sure that at this rate they might not be able to complete everything in time. There was a short partnership handshake. The girl recognized the man and covered her mouth with her hand in horror. It was the owner of the top of Gilly himself. He was just taking off his hood, revealing a recognizable red-haired head. The girl did not understand why they needed those human bodies brought in the cart, and what actually happened. When the man took off his robe, his body immediately began to change. The girl pinched her nose and closed her eyes. She was disgusted. The horses reared up in fear and broke from their harness. Yusfir saw magic for the first time. Pink shadows stretched up into the sky towards the moon. Something unusual was also happening below. The guy wondered out loud what he should do this time. His eyes glowed with pink dots and his hair looked blue-gray in the moonlight. The girl couldn't believe it. It turned out to be a magician who pretended to be the owner of the top of Gilly. She couldn't believe that there were still wizards in their world, who had enough power to transform into other people. The tree told Yusfir that by disturbing the order of these lands, this man risked bringing the wrath of the goddess upon all the local inhabitants. This is where the magician threw away unsuccessful samples for his experiments. The girl realized that they were talking about experimental people. She wondered what was going on here. "Kwana, ask your wife why she returned from her walk in such a hurry and what happened." Yusfir wanted to tell what happened in the forest, but she noticed that a man approached them. He said that it was a joy and honor for him to have such guests at home. He introduced himself to His Majesty, that his name was Roman and he was the owner of the top of Gilly. When the girl saw him up close, she felt that he possessed a huge amount of magic, the likes of which she had never felt before. The girl assumed that this Roman was serving her brother, but their magical potential was definitely different. The likelihood that it was the same person was extremely low. Perhaps he found out that solidiosis could be neutralized with the help of these bodies. Roman assured the emperor that he was very glad to see them. The owner suggested discussing the future of the empire with the rulers. Yusfir voiced that there have been quite a lot of problems recently. The biggest of them is solidiosis, which greatly worries the people of the empire. Her Majesty's hands began to shake from these thoughts. The girl forced herself to tear herself away from sad thoughts. The blonde encouraged herself that she would now be able to find out what he was up to, how the drug is going to be monopolized. She tried not to show her anxiety, saying that she had heard the latest news. "And I asked the owner if he was going to open shops all over the country to make medicine more accessible. She supposed it was a good plan, but I doubted that people couldn't buy it precisely because of this." Roman asked the emperor about issuing a guarantee for the construction. He said that there are still people who are not familiar with their products. Yusfir saw a bottle of medicine fall to the floor and break. Roman tried to interest the emperor. He assumed that people would understand that they could be trusted, and he guaranteed that the number of patients cured of an incurable disease would increase. He assured that their state was young and had just laid its foundation, and if it has military power and huge capital, it will be able to gain the devotion of its people. The man convinced that he was helping to achieve this devotion for the empire. Yusfir did not believe that he cared about the fate of people, and Roman wants to get a guarantee for his own benefit. The blonde felt uneasy. She didn't even know how to confront her brother yet, and now this. Yusfir refused the host of the banquet, saying that there was no guarantee for him. Kavanagh explained that he is an obedient husband, and if his empress is against it, then he does not intend to give the go-ahead. For a second, anger flashed in the eyes of the owner of the peak, but Roman quickly suppressed it. He said that he was forced to leave them. Roman invited their majesties to many entertainments. At the end, there was a gorgeous and quite spectacular magical fireworks display. As Kwana and his lover watched the magical fireworks, he noticed the excitement in his lover's eyes, and he asked if she was okay, and if she wanted to say something. The blonde replied that there were too many people there. Yusfir thought that she had lost all hope, but it was important for her, both then and now, for her husband to hug her. The girl smiled and explained that if he is nearby, then everything will be fine. She wondered who he was to her. Yusfir sincerely hoped that if everything ended peacefully, then he would be able to accept her despite all the secrets, and then they would be forever. The imperial couple kissed while fireworks exploded. Kvanna asked his wife if her throat was dry. He offered to try the drink. He took 2 glasses from the waiter's tray. Her husband asked her to wait. He sniffed the wine and drank a little, tasting it. He told the girl to drink the drink calmly. She was surprised because among all people there is no one more important than him, and she reproached him for risking himself so much. Yusfir took a sip of wine from a glass. The husband joked that there is no one who is as resistant to poisons as he is, and it's better for him to check himself than to bother people in vain. He said he didn't want her to get hurt. Horror flashed in the Emperor's eyes when he saw blood slowly flowing from Yusfir's mouth. Her hands were also covered in blood, and her consciousness was slowly becoming clouded. Kvanna doesn't understand what's happening to his beloved, because there was no poison there. The husband begged the girl to wake up and blamed himself for it. Simon rushed to their aid. Aslan was also nearby, numb with horror. The Emperor's face was covered in blood, and tears flowed uncontrollably from his eyes. He wanted to find those who did this and brutally kill them, so that these people feel the pain that they forced him to experience. The girl tried with all her strength to remain conscious because she knew that if she died, everything would happen again. Roman watched with some pleasure as the Emperor knelt holding his beloved in his arms. The young doctor called Her Majesty. He said he had to act quickly and he was afraid that they might not have time to save the Empress. Kvanna pressed his wife's head to his shoulder. He understood that he had failed again and would not have a second attempt. The couple seemed to be in the hands of evil intent. The Emperor asked and begged his wife not to leave him in this cruel world. Aslan tugged at the gentleman's shoulder. He told him, bringing him out of his trance of grief, that they had already found the one who poisoned the Empress. He had just been forced out of admitting that he had added poison. The girl's body went limp. The guy told His Majesty that first they would interrogate the criminal and restore order. But Kvanna pulled out his sword and approached the person who was kneeling with it. He cried and howled, realizing what awaited him. The Emperor put his foot on his head and asked where the antidote was. Aslan called His Majesty. The male suspect was crying and screaming. Aslan said it was strange. After all, he had just admitted that he poisoned the Empress, and now he said that he knew nothing. Kvanna stuck the sheathed sword next to the suspect's head. He angrily asked who ordered his wife to be poisoned. Yusfir was in pain. Her body seemed to be on fire. She couldn't understand what had happened, and she assumed that this was already the end. A male voice, sad but so familiar, persistently called to her. With difficulty, through her half-open eyes, she saw Kvannak's face, distorted with grief. The girl thought that if she died like this, then Kvanna could release his rage on all people out of grief. Yusfir told herself that she needed to calm down. She realized that something was wrong with the wine. But Kvanna also drank it, and everything was fine with him. They had a difference in the amount of magic. She suggested that this poison, like solidiosis, could only affect wizards. The girl tried to calm herself down and remember how she controlled her powers then. It was necessary to direct the forces and the poison would cease to act. She had to survive so that Kvanna could live in peace with everyone. The rain was torrential. The guy asked His Majesty how long he planned to keep the aristocrats in custody. He said that the best rooms were allocated to them, but they were still unhappy. And it was quite natural that even the Emperor could not do this without good reason. Yusfir lay motionless on the bed. The Emperor said there was no reason, but it was obvious that someone was behind this incident. The guy told His Majesty that the cook committed the crime because he confessed, and Kvanna saw everything himself. In addition, he asked to remember what he said during the interrogation, that he kept repeating the same thing. How many lives did the Empire sacrifice to be reborn? That man said that they would not dare to mix the noble blood of Radon with the dirt flowing through the veins of that stranger. With a crazy smile, he assured that he was ready to give his life for this noble cause. Kvanna was about to raise his sword over the madman, but Aslan was able to stop him. Only later did the Emperor himself realize that the man could not have planned everything himself. The Emperor repeated the madman's words to himself, analyzing them. He remembered that the previous emperor was obsessed with the idea of pure blood and hatred of foreign countries, and maybe he had something to do with it. The assistant reminded His Highness that they seemed to have killed all the members of the Fernand dynasty, but Kvanna did not understand why he was so sure of this. After all, they could not know for sure that none of those people were left alive. Aslan was surprised. After all, the cook admitted that he did it alone, and Kvanna was going to announce that the previous emperor was somehow connected with what happened. The guy somehow couldn't wrap his head around it, and he was not sure that aristocrats and ordinary people would believe it. He assured Kvanak that the position of the empire was already precarious. Aslan believed that it was unacceptable to lead the country to collapse. After all, they had just put their country on its feet. The emperor walked nervously around the room, holding his head in despair. He said that now he didn't care about anything anymore. The emperor was sad that Yusufir had not woken up for the 5th day. They had already tried everything, but it was all to no avail. Kvanna thought that he himself would probably have to interrogate the suspect and the rest of the guests. He promised her that those non-humans would beg him for death and would tell him everything. Aslan slammed his boot hard against the wall and cursed. Not only did he put them all into custody, but now he will also arrange an interrogation. He called the gentleman a cretin, completely out of his mind because of a woman. The assistant was surprised that everything was because of some woman. The servant said that she was not just a woman but an empress, and he understood how difficult it was. He told Aslan that he simply did not know what Kvanna was like then. He has now become a completely different person. Then the emperor's eyes burned with a predatory fire, and he was ready to kill a person by going crazy. The emperor sat under the couch with his immovable wife. He kissed her pale hand. His memories took him back to the mountains. It was pouring rain there. This was his past. It was in the Radon mountain range. The man called the boy a brat, reminding him that he was a slave. He blamed the boy for daring to contradict his master. The leg was on the child's back. Another assured that it was not worth the effort. The young master sat down next to the child lying on the bare ground. He said that every year there were such non-entities as this one who did not know their place. But they all had the same path for a single punishment, cruelly and forcefully grabbing him by his jet-black hair. He gave the order to lock the boy in the stable. From under his forehead, the child looked with anger at his tormentor and executioner. Blood flowed from his broken nose and lip. It was clear that he had been severely beaten before. This was Kvanak Radonsky at the age of 14. The master reminded him not to give anything to the slave without his direct order, and make sure he doesn't run away. He suggested the boy try to survive. He was thrown into the passage between the animal stalls. Kvanna lay on a thin animal bedding. He didn't know what day it was, and he didn't remember the last time he drank. The boy wondered if he really would die like that. Then, out of helplessness, he thought that perhaps it was even for the better. But suddenly, someone collapsed next to him on a bed of straw. The boy swore in surprise. The blonde asked for forgiveness. She looked at him with her cheerful green eyes, and she said that it seemed to her that he was unconscious and was very scared. The boy asked the young lady how she got here. After all, there were guards outside. The girl said that there were no soldiers there, or anyone else. The boy thought that if he died soon, then there was no need to keep an eye on him. He cursed under his breath. He sat down, hiding his head. The blonde asked if he was okay, and she suggested calling someone for help. But he replied, it was pointless. The boy asked to just let him die quietly. He suddenly remembered all the cruelty that he had recently endured. The master said that the death of one slave would not change anything. The girl pulled the boy's sleeve. She was sure he was in pain, and she insisted that she couldn't let him die. She told him that he might consider it useless and pointless, but she will still help him with all her might. The boy asked who she was and where she had come from so suddenly, and now she brought him medicine and food every day. A week ago, she came for the 2nd time. He wasn't expecting her at all then. The boy asked her what could have brought her to such a distance. The girl sat next to the slave and carefully bandaged his hand with a clean new bandage. Bottles with medicinal emulsions stood underfoot. She asked if he finally decided to find out her name. The blonde introduced herself as Yusufir Katatel, and that she was from the country of Akia in the north. The boy's eyes widened in surprise. He thought it was a small country. The man called the princess. Then the boy realized that his savior was not an ordinary girl, she was a princess. The blonde had just finished dressing the bandage. She smiled and said that she had already finished everything. Now the boy understood. The blonde must have been curious. He knew that there were no slaves in the north. and seeing his emaciated body here, pity simply awoke in her. He told himself that the girl took pity on him like a mongrel that he could come to if he suddenly became bored. He noticed a bandage on her leg and asked what happened. On a pile of straw lay a bag with bread and some other fresh food. The girl said that when she came here yesterday, she got her clothes very dirty. Her brother saw this. That day she was introduced to a member of the imperial family named Banan as his future wife, and the girl had to look good in his eyes. But something didn't work out. The brother hugged and asked for forgiveness from Yusfir. He admitted that he was very angry with her, and he promised that this would not happen again. The fragments were scattered on the floor, and the girl's leg was bleeding due to a cut. The boy said that this could not happen. Benin was a member of the imperial family, and he was only a distant relative of the Fernand family. That man had neither silver hair nor violet eyes, and the imperial family would never commit such atrocities on this outskirts. The boy said that he himself came all this way only because that man played with the slaves as if they were toys out of boredom. He was sure that something bad could happen to those who tried to stop the monsters beating other people for fun. He believed that the girl should not curry favor with that freak, and he was sure that it was not worth her suffering. The boy asked the princess not to come here again. The girl said that he was probably right. She admitted that she didn't really want to get married. She said that yesterday she was in a lot of pain, but now she's scared. The princess said that she decided to move on with her life, knowing what a terrible person she was, and continue to pretend that he doesn't know what kind of cruel person Banan really is. And she advised him to run away, and don't pretend like she did that he didn't know anything. Tears flowed uncontrollably down the princess's cheeks. She asked him to do whatever he could to protect others. Yusfir voiced that she does not think that a person's character is determined by his status, and I asked his opinion on this matter. The girl assured that even if her brother scolded her, she would still come here, and one way or another he will return him to the north. The sun was breaking through the clouds. The princess said that they say that people in the south give handkerchiefs to the knights they want to be with. The boy was crying. He said that he was not a knight, and the girl said that for her he was the greatest knight. All his life he remembered the promise he made to her then. After all, then for the first time he was not ashamed of himself. And I wanted to become someone significant. Therefore, it was not he who was truly great, but the girl. The boy wanted to tell his savior all this to his face, but the next day he was taken to the front line. He didn't know if she was still waiting to meet him. Then he decided that he would give his life if it would help him meet her again. The guy wanted to be worthy of the handkerchief that she gave him then, calling him a knight. He told himself that if they could see each other, then he wanted to truly become her knight, and he wanted to be with her. The girl's soul responded. She told the man that he had indeed become a knight. She showed how in a past life he sat with her on his lap in her last minutes of life, bleeding from an arrow in her heart. The man said that Yusfir was mistaken. After all, he could not protect her from death and cruelty. He could not save his people and country, for which he fought so hard all his life. And he had nothing more to strive for and nothing to fight for. He told Yusfir that he didn't even know which path was right now. He said that he could not become a knight. Kavana stood on the balcony. His cloak, scarlet as blood, fluttered in the gusty wind. His Majesty was called from behind. The guy was carrying a box in his hands. He said that they found this book in the king's chambers. The emperor unfolded it in its intended place. It said that every ruler of Achaea had the right to see the Silver Forest, the guardian deity of this country once. And you could make one single wish. Kavana lifted his head from the pages of the book and began to look at the sky, thinking. He thought that his only desire was to save Yusfir. There was a fierce battle under the castle of the ruler of Achaea. Everything around was on fire. The swords gave off the reflection of fire and were bloody. Kavana looked into the next door of the room, and there was no ruler. Shields, spears, overturned furniture, candelabra were scattered on the floor. The shadow of the broad-shouldered conqueror lay menacingly on the floor carpet. On one of the walls hung a picture in a gilded vintage frame. It depicted the Roller family. They were happy and smiling. The glass cracked and fell into pieces on the floor nearby. The last heir of the Catatel family and the current ruler, Dakvid Catatel, disappeared somewhere without a trace. But in order to meet the Silver Forest, Kavana had to kill the ruler of Achaea and gain his throne. The man next to the candles was deep in thought. In his hands he held the handkerchief that he had kept after so many years. An assistant came to the emperor. He said that according to the information received, the magician who had left Her Majesty was working for the king of Achaea. The man wanted to avenge the death of Eusphere, but for this it was necessary to catch her scoundrel brother. The assistant assured that Achaea was already on the verge of extinction, and he could not understand why they had been storming the northern mountain range for months now. After all, the king will destroy himself if left alone. He did not understand the emperor's desire for the land of Achaea to turn into a wasteland, and he could not understand why the throne of this small country was more important for the ruler than his duty to the people of his empire. But he soon suggested that this could be due to the fabulous amount of magic stones that Kwanna spent to preserve the body of the empress. The guy clenched his fists. He sadly reported that Jaxer had died. It was reported that he was trying to track down Dakvid, whom the emperor was so desperately looking for. Jaxer was ambushed and killed by soldiers from the northern army. Bloody bodies lay in the clearing, and on the tree branches sat crows, ready for a mournful meal. The guy asked the emperor if this was what he wanted. And was this the empire he wanted? He asked at least now to think about the empire and the military men. Tears of despair streamed down his face. Kwanna held the hand of his wife, who lay lifeless in her body supported by the wonders of magic. His hands were shaking. The man remembered how he and Jaxer drank beer from large wooden mugs and fooled around at the bar. He hugged and lifted his wife's body. It was snowing that day. The guy happily reported that they had finally caught him. The king of Achaea was dead, and now they could return home. The emperor's sword was bloody. His best friend lay dead on the battlefield next to his brothers in arms, and the fighting did not stop. But this is not the kind of empire Kvanok wanted. He went to the Silver Forest. Raising his head up, the man said that he was now the king of these lands, and he asked her to fulfill his wish. He prayed to the guardian to save Eusphere's life, pressing her body to his chest. The goddess called him by name, calling him a lonely king. She knew that he had come a long way, but he was a stranger here, and she said that she could not fulfill his wish. The man knew that she could fulfill any desire of the ruler of Achaea, and he reminded me if this was not what she promised. The tree replied that everything was true, but provided that this desire does not contradict God's will. And the death of this child has already become one of the lines of the primordial scripture, and even she could not erase this trace. Kwanna was depressed. He asked that if that was the case, then why was he needed here? After all, he thought that he would finally be able to see Eusphere's smile again. But she ended up where even the gods could not reach her. The man was going to return her to the north. He said that she planned to take him with her, and now she had to keep her promise. The emperor placed his hand on the hilt of his battle sword. He thought that if he could not return the girl, then he himself would go after her to a place from where there would be no way back for them. The tree asked Kvanok to stop. Ono insisted that it was too early to despair. The guardian said that she created this silver forest and buried her sister here, and her name was Fahar. Kvanna turned to the goddess and asked her what she wanted to say. Was there still hope left, and was it too early to give up? The silver forest answered with a riddle that Eusphere is a lonely shining star, who has the power to eclipse all the evil of this world. And only thanks to her radiance could he bloom again. But this was beyond the power of the goddess. That life left the girl's body stupidly and too easily. Fahar said that at that time she could not help her do everything as expected, and he is going to give them this chance at least now. But now she can't breathe life into it. It was already too late. The goddess said that she would turn back time and return to that moment when death was still very far away. The emperor told the goddess that the girl was like a little sister to him. And doesn't the goddess want to save Eusphere just like he does? Silver Forest said that before becoming one of his children, the girl was a guardian. The lady also grieved that she had lost her. But the balance of this world was already incredibly fragile. Therefore, the goddess was no longer as strong as before. Silver Forest agreed to return the girl, but she doubted that all the troubles would not overtake her again because fate could not be rewritten. She said they needed another chance. The goddess was amazed that Kwanna gave up everything to get a chance and conquer this country. The lady asked if he was ready to go against destiny again and bring Eusphere back to life and fight her fate. The emperor swore that he would devote his life to protecting the girl. Silver Forest could not understand the monarch. He became the emperor of Rodion and even the king of Achaea. He rose so high, and for some reason now he wants to give it all up. The man remembered his first meeting with the girl, how she told him about flowers, and she promised to show him many more beautiful flowers and her favorite books when they were in Achaea. Yusfir said that sometimes they give her a raspberry dessert, her favorite, and promised to share it with her boyfriend. In her dreams, she imagined how they would sit together by the fountain, eat goodies together, and read something interesting. Kavana promised that they would be happy, and now there's nothing to be done. He wanted to be his princess's knight again. When Kavana returned to the past, he immediately began looking for Yusfir. He promised himself to do everything so as not to lose her again. He noticed that the girl had changed and became even stronger and wiser than before. The princess looked after the wounded old man. Yusfir asked what his name was. He bowed and introduced himself as Marcus. He knew that fate could not be changed. In this life, Dakvid's goal will be to get rid of Yusfir. The guy understood that he had to become an emperor again and protect his beloved. He realized that this was his last chance.
The girl was lying on the bed and her lover was sitting next to her bed. Fresh flowers stood in a vase. Today it was scarlet tulips.
The girl's soul wandered in the darkness. At some point she saw a man in a red cloak bending over her body. She walked over and gently touched his shoulder. When the princess woke up, the Kwanas could not hold back their tears. He pressed her hand to his lips. There was not a drop of poison left in the girl's body. Even though the Empress slept for 5 days, there was nothing wrong with her body. Simon sat and felt the Empress's fingers. An excited Mariana stood nearby. The maid said that her mistress was vilely poisoned and she spent many days unconscious. But despite this, she woke up and returned the Emperor to them. For this, she thanked her. Simon whimpered and cried, taking off his glasses and covering his face. He screamed with delight that he was incredibly happy that day. The Empress was surprised that she slept for so long. Yusfir hugged the people close to her, who suddenly became so emotional and now could not hold back their tears. She said that she would never allow something like this to happen again, and asked them to calm down. She understood that it must have been very difficult for them all this time. The girl saw that her husband did not show emotions, but it was not easy for him either. She asked herself what he felt, and on the Emperor's face there was a blissful and dreamy smile. He knew that everything was all right now. Kvana sat tired on the sofa and watched with joy as the maid and the doctor hugged his beloved wife. Finally, the Emperor got up from the sofa and headed to Yusfir's bed. He told her that everyone was so worried about her. The man was rubbing his neck, which was stiff from sitting for a long time. He claimed that he even had to dissuade Oslin and Jaxor from coming here every day. The girl asked about the fate of the Gilly Peak. She wondered what happened to Roman. The Emperor said that an investigation into this issue is currently underway. Kavana told his wife that she had just woken up, and she didn't have to worry about that yet. But she continued to insist on her point. Our heroine thought that Kavana did not yet know that Roman was the one who put poison in her drink. She thought that on the day of the banquet, so important for the top, he would not dare to harm her. But Yusfir was wrong. Roman didn't care about any of this, including the sale of a cure for solidiosis. A group of shiny steel tips were pointed at the man. He smiled, raising his hands up. Yusfir remembered that in a past life, Dakvid got rid of her with the help of a wizard and used her death as a pretext to start a war and cause confusion in the Empire. She realized that the wizard who followed the orders of her brother in a past life, apparently, was Roman. She didn't notice it because his magic had become completely different. The girl was brought out of her thoughts by Kavanak's voice. He persistently called her name, but Yusfir continued her thoughts. She suggested that the man collected all those bodies in order to increase his magical power and change it. The girl firmly grabbed her husband by the sleeve of his jacket. She said that she understood that it sounded crazy, but she needed to see Roman. After all, if she meets him, she will be able to find out who is behind the assassination attempt. Kavana told her that he understood her feelings, but nevertheless, he asked to leave this matter to him. Yusfir continued to insist on her point. She assured me that this was really very important. She asked why she could not see the criminal. She was surprised why her husband didn't trust her. He said she was wrong, assuring that he was simply concerned about her safety, that if something suddenly happened again, he might not be able to bear it anymore. The Emperor knelt before his wife, his hands wrapped around both of her hands. The man said that she almost died in front of his eyes, and he asked her how he could not worry when he almost lost her again. The Emperor pressed his forehead to his beloved's hand. Yusfir wondered why he was so worried, and she assumed that during this time something could have happened. She said that if her husband didn't tell her, she would find out herself, and that's why she asked Kavanak to tell her everything now. The girl stroked the man's cheek soothingly. He said that Roman had disappeared. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. She asked how this could happen. The man asked her to calm down. He held her tightly by the shoulders and looked into her eyes, promising that he would now try to explain everything to her. Roman was detained on the same day on suspicion of organizing an assassination attempt on the Empress. Once a day, Oslin interrogated a captured criminal. But yesterday, when he came to him at the usual time, he was unpleasantly surprised. A guard lay motionless on the floor of the cell. That day, they learned that Roman changed the soldier's appearance to his own and simply disappeared. And since they did not immediately know about his escape, it was now almost impossible to track him down. And someday he might try to harm Yusfir again. Kavana would not want to deceive his wife, just so that she can relax and rest at least until she recovers completely. He believed that it was entirely his fault, and he had no right to drag his wife into this. The girl did not understand what his fault was, but he was sure that everything was wrong from the very beginning. Kwana reproached himself for drowning himself in blood just to become emperor. There was sorrow in the girl's eyes. The man turned his back and clenched his fists in anger. Her husband told Yusfir that it was he who ruined her. The girl asked why he thought so and what they were talking about. The emperor assumed that some of the members of the overthrown ruling dynasty remained alive, and now this was the only force capable of assassinating the empress. Kavana admitted that before he was not worried that they could try to poison him, and he considered this only a possible inconvenience that he would have to deal with in the future. Which he would have to deal with in the future in order to get rid of slavery and revive the country. Kavana did not even imagine how this could turn out, but now he blamed himself for the fact that Yusfir had suffered because of him. The girl was in a hurry to tell her husband that he was wrong. She thought that she needed to tell him everything now, that it was her brother and not the imperial family Fernand who was behind the affair. But the girl remembered that if she told her husband everything now, then her contract with her brother would be completely revealed. Her inner voice asked why she suddenly became silent, assuming that she was afraid that Kwana would leave her. She called Yusfir stupid, and that because of her a bloody war will still begin. The girl realized that if Kwana found out what she was hiding, he would definitely be angry. The emperor took his wife's hand and pressed it to his cheek. He assured her that he didn't need anything, if only she was always by his side. Therefore, he asked her not to leave him. Yusfir looked at her beloved with pity and repentance. She blamed herself. How could she leave him alone in this hell? The girl understood better than anyone that although he was an emperor, he remained a man. Besides, he didn't believe in himself, and everyone who was dear to him left him. And she knew it from her own experience how terrible it was. Yusfir pressed her head to her husband's chest. She asked to forgive her. She admitted that she had been lying to him all this time, and she realized that this was only her fault. She said that Roman was a wizard, that he changed his appearance with magic and escaped. Therefore, the soldiers could not understand what really happened. Tears flowed uncontrollably from the girl's eyes. She said that it was her brother who stood behind Roman, and not the survivors of the Fernand family. Dakvid sent his sister to Kavana to kill her here, and then use this as a pretext to start a war with the Empire. The man asked that if his wife knew about this before, then why did she only now decide to tell him? He wondered why she hadn't asked for his help earlier. Yusfir admitted that she did not want to part with him. After all, he was so kind to her and made her happy. She admitted that she dreamed that their marriage would last longer. She also dreamed of how she and Kavana would have 2 children. They were walking in the clearing. The daughter hugged her father, and the mother hugged their son. The girl confessed to her husband that, in fact, she was not able to give him what he so desired. But despite this, she dared to love him. Yusfir admitted that she was afraid what if she told him everything about her brother? Then her secret will be revealed. She expressed her regret. She said that she could not have children. The girl said that she found out about her infertility shortly before their wedding. But then she was afraid that if her husband found out about this, he would immediately dissolve their union. Then he shared with her how important family was to him, and the girl admitted that she was afraid that he would never forgive her. And she didn't dare tell him that. Now she sincerely blamed herself for ruining everything. The girl was shaking all over, crying hysterically. But the emperor began to console her. He assured his wife that everything was completely different. He smiled and reminded her of his words that he didn't need anyone but her. Gvanak told himself that if he could spend his whole life with Yusfir, then he would not be afraid of any tests sent by the gods. He admitted to his wife what he thought about her, and he said that's why he decided to marry her, assuring her that heirs had never been that important to him. Kavana gently caressed his wife's ear with his fingers. He spoke words of love to her, looking into her eyes with a gaze shining with happiness. And he admitted that this feeling warmed his soul. Yusfir hugged her beloved. She cried and said that she was scared. Kwana couldn't understand why she was experiencing these feelings, and he was surprised that she was afraid that he loved her. The girl said that she loved him too, and that's why she was scared. She was afraid that one day it all might suddenly collapse. Kwana pressed his lips to hers, merging in a passionate kiss. Tears flowed from the girl's eyes. She looked into his eyes. Meanwhile, the man unbuttoned her dress on the back with one hand, exposing her shoulder blades and lowering it from his wife's shoulder. The man hugged Yusfir and invited her to bed with him. Soon, strands of her golden hair were scattered on the bed. Moans of passion burst from her chest. Clothes were on the floor. The girl turned to Kvanak, resting her palm on his chest. He continued to kiss her other palm, reveling in pleasure. There were scars on his chest, traces of past battles. The girl asked him to wait. She was a little confused. He spread her legs and knelt between them. She said she didn't know what she should do. He assured her that he didn't know, but everything was fine. Yusfir asked what it means this will also be a training session. She reminded her that he had previously offered to train her, since they had something for the first time. The emperor threw his wife onto her back. He said that he was sure that their training was no longer necessary. The man lowered himself to the level of the girl's pelvis and began to kiss her thigh. Moans began to burst from her lips. When his face was above her again, she thought that he looked like someone to her. It was the first time she had seen Kwana like this, and he reminded her of a man she had met a long time ago. Yusfir said that she seemed to have seen him before. He asked her not to have her head in the clouds, which he did not agree with. He asked me to think only about him, and he started kissing her all over. The girl moaned. His fingers penetrated her and squeezed tightly. She asked him to wait through moans. Later, her fingers also squeezed her husband's intertwined fingers. She moaned again, unable to contain herself. The girl's knees were shaking. She pressed his naked torso between them. The man made rhythmic movements of his body. His breath rushed noisily from his chest. Yusfir admitted that she still couldn't believe it. After all, she thought that if she revealed the truth to her husband, he would never forgive her. She believed that he did not need a barren empress. Kavana stroked his wife's shoulder comfortingly. He wanted to return to her question about whether they had met before. At first, she couldn't understand why he suddenly decided to remember this. But then I was surprised, assuming that it was true. The man answered her in the affirmative, and he reminded him that she saved him then. And even then he realized that he wanted to marry a beautiful girl named Yusfir. After all, next to him she was neither a princess nor the guardian of Akia. He then resorted to a fake marriage due to his impatience. He now very much regretted it. Only then did the girl realize that her husband had known her from the very beginning. The girl could not understand why she could not recognize him. Gvana laughingly said that he had simply changed a lot since then. He said that he had to survive. He gave up everything he had. And the saddest thing is that he made the wrong choice over and over again. Gvana said that his wife would be disappointed if she found out what kind of life he lived, and that to some extent he was even glad when he realized that Yusfir did not remember him. The girl buried her face in his shoulder. She promised that she wouldn't ask him anything he didn't want to tell her. But this did not mean at all that she was disappointed in him. Yusfir said that she would wait just as he did then, so that he could open up to her just as she could open up to him. The girl was convinced that this would take time, and a lot of time, but she will never leave him. After all, the moment he came to Akia for her, she chose him. She asked first to tell her about everything that happened, and what they had to face while she lay here. She wanted to know how Roman escaped and all the details. Yusfir took her husband's hand. She promised him that from now on they would solve this problem together. Kwana said that she didn't even know how grateful he was to her for being with him now. He asked his wife if he had gone too far then, and he assumed that everything was probably hurting her now. Yusfir started shouting at him. After all, wasn't it hard for him that day? Then she asked him to move more slowly, but she assured that everything was fine now. The girl was surprised that her husband was going to deal with this himself, without bothering her. She understood his excitement and desire to protect, and she assured that it was much more important for her to go through everything with him. She looked into his eyes with green eyes and held her husband's hand, and she said that she wanted to be his empress. Kavanak asked to forgive him, assuring him that he was not thinking clearly right now, and he offered to bring her up to date, telling her everything he knew. As soon as they learned about Roman's escape, they immediately blocked all exits from the capital. Then they interrogated the soldiers who were on guard that day. The man said that they had a guard log, and he assured that he could bring it to his wife if she wanted. He said that besides that, they had not found anything yet, and only from her did he learn that Roman turned out to be a magician. Oyusphere said that then, in her opinion, the information she knew could be useful. The man did not understand what was being said. The girl said that the plants had already shown her several times how Roman uses magic, and what she saw then horrified her. It looked like he was collecting the numb corpses of people with solidiosis. She reminded her husband how she had previously told him that each person has his own limit of magic, which he can handle on his own. According to her guesses, it turned out that Roman was originally an outstanding wizard, but it is not visible enough to go beyond human standards. But now she was afraid that he had started using those corpses to perform black magic. Kavana clenched his teeth tightly in anger. The bodies of those killed by the epidemic were kept in the temple. It turned out that Roman had his own people there too. Oyusphere thought this was very strange. It didn't matter that her brother was standing behind her. She was sure that the inhabitants of the empire would not cooperate with a prince from distant Achaea and an unknown wizard. Indeed, in addition, local aristocrats and priests were very wary of strangers and still valued legitimacy. Quana said that this is why he assumed that the assassination attempt was organized by a survivor of the dynasty, Fernand. After all, the force through which they were supported was always the legality of government and purebredness. Previous rulers of the empire constantly promoted the idea of how different the origins of slaves and aristocrats were, and this ensured them the loyalty of the conservatives. Kavana was sure that among the current nobility, there were those who only pretended to be loyal to the new empire. But in fact, he supported the old principles, and they didn't even care that the Fernands practiced incest to preserve pure blood. These aristocrats only wanted the benefits that could be derived from inequality and slavery. Oyusphere said that she now understood why her husband was still trying to find the surviving members of the previous empire. He said that when they founded the country, they dealt with all the heirs. Now they should look for people with silver hair and violet eyes. The girl had a look of amazement on her face. Kavana explained to his wife that the distinctive feature of the Fernand family was bright silver hair and violet eyes. The man said that he was aware of the fact that those who did not meet these conditions were simply thrown out or killed. The girl said that Roman looked exactly like this. She definitely remembered his unusual silver hair and violet eyes. Her chin trembled and she clenched her fists. It turned out that her brother teamed up with Roman not only because he needed power. She suspected that they wanted to use the revival of the imperial Fernand dynasty as a pretext for war. The elements raged over the Count's house. The rain poured down like a wall. The living room windows glowed with warm light. A man came into the house and wiped rainwater from his face. The woman was surprised that her husband returned earlier than usual today. The owner of the house was scratching his head. He told his wife that all these so-called aristocrats had gathered in the palace and did not know how their meeting ended. It was Duke Howard. He said that Count Goto was also detained and the deal went to waste. It was so inappropriate at such an important time. The lady was drinking tea. The husband was sure that if she had won over the Empress, then all these suspicions could have been avoided. The woman silently lowered her eyes to the floor. She asked her husband what he thought about dinner, but he asked to leave him alone. The Duchess, looking offended, went to the top floor, leaving her husband alone. The man was drinking tea. He complained, saying that inside and outside there was no person anywhere who could help him.
The voice came out of nowhere. He asked who he was talking about. The cup involuntarily flew out of the Duke's hands. The man tensed his whole body.
A man in a cloak with a hood suddenly appeared on the threshold. The Duke could not understand who he was. The newcomer was surprised that his face had already been forgotten. The owner of the house backed away. He recognized the unexpected guest as Roman. The man left traces of dirty shoes all along his path. The Duke asked him why he decided to appear here, to which he replied that they had something to talk about, and therefore he could not help but come. The guest asked Duke Howard why he betrayed him, But he only grinned in fear of him. Roman insisted that he shouldn't have been afraid. After all, he promised that if he helps him several times and does not interfere, then he will give him what he wants. He blamed Howard for giving up everything at the most important moment. The guest said that because of him he had to intervene and make efforts to arrange this story with the cook, confusing everyone. And if he had enough money, he wouldn't mess with idiots. The Duke recalled that from the very beginning he said that he only wanted to return his family to its former greatness, and his crazy plans were not part of the Duke's plans. Roman was surprised that something didn't stop him, and he was well aware of what would happen during the banquet. He slowly approached Howard, and he backed away and ordered the guest not to come close to him. The wizard said that it was the Duke who all this time received income from the sale of medicine for silidiosis, and he also conveyed information about future reforms. It turned out that the illustrious Duke, one of the founders of the new empire, dreamed of its fall more than anyone else. The magician said that everything was fine and that he no longer blamed Howard, and I came to him today to give him another chance. The owner of the house began to shout at the guest. I assured him that he didn't need any chance, and he suspected that he was going to pull some trick again. Roman said that he was just going to show the people their rightful ruler, who could raise this shaky empire to the ground. Putting his hand to his forehead, he began the transformation process. Soon a guy with silver hair and violet eyes stood in front of the surprised Duke. He informed the Duke that it was about the last representative of the Fernand family. He said that now that they were targeting her, the Empress would no longer be able to hide from them, because someone like him, who knows the value of true power, helped him. Howard was amazed, and the guest asked him how he knew in this case, and then he was informed that the Emperor would sell the ownership of the Misril mine, how he was able to escape from custody from the palace. Roman assured that he had his own people at the door, those who supported him. He asked if the Duke knew what was the most important thing in magic that allowed brainwashing. He admitted that these were desires. Among them was an obsession with the purity of blood, wariness towards a foreigner, a thirst for former power and wealth. Roman continued to hold the Duke by the hair on his head, and he believed that all he had to do was promise the aristocrats that they would get what they wanted. Duke Howard was sitting on the floor of the hallway. Crouching next to him was Roman. But then another uninvited guest in a cloak with a hood came through the door. His shadow lay on the floor of the house, stretching from the village. The silver-haired man smiled contentedly. He said that now the Duke would obey him unquestioningly, and he assured that they didn't have much time left. He told the one who entered that the time had come to return, their empire. He stood silently on the threshold, waiting for a pause. The deep hood almost completely hid his facial features. It turned out that if Roman was really a member of the Fernand family, then now the fact that Eusphir's brother was preparing for war against the Empire from the very beginning seemed rather illogical to her. And the plan was to create a new state with the support of the former ruling dynasty. Quana assumed that this was why they founded the top of Gili and began selling the medicine, and they pretended to help people suffering from the epidemic. They were going to expand the boundaries of their influence. Eusphir thought that she was stupid. In a past life, the war that her brother started ended in his defeat. She could not even imagine that an even more dangerous plan would be revealed. The girl remembered her brother's words then in the forest. He talked about a promise to give power, thanks to which he was going to overthrow the Radon Empire. But she didn't know what this power was, and she assumed that it was something related to silidiosis and the Fernand family. And it turned out that behind her brother stood the heir of the deposed emperor. Our heroine thought that she shouldn't have blindly believed that she had to be afraid of her death, as she did in her previous life. Then she had barely returned to life, and she could no longer miss such an opportunity. The husband saw his wife's confusion and tried to bring her out of this state, and she continued her thoughts holding her head, and she didn't know what to see now.